Chapter 95. The second update will be released later, around 11 p.m. tonight. Lin Feng was not affected by Shui Ren's provocation. With his teaching ability, no, it should be number one's teaching ability, he had never worried about the problem of the test. If even the students taught by number one could not meet the requirements of the academy, then it was likely that in the entire Azurewood continent, it would be impossible to find another teacher that could satisfy the academy. However, he more or less felt a little baffled. This Shui Ren had provoked him time and time again for no reason at all. This caused him to be unable to understand. "What a clown," said Lin Feng, shaking his head. He then turned and left. After dinner, Lin Feng went to the crafting room again. However, this time, he did not go to the classroom. Instead, he went to the specialized crafting room that was assigned to him as a crafting teacher. At this time, Fu Yi, Jiang He Qiaowen, and Yao Yongkai were practicing in the crafting room. Because there were not many materials in the academy, they had to use the same materials every time they practiced. This caused the learning effect to be slightly lower. "Teacher." Seeing Lin Feng, the four of them stood up and greeted him. Lin Feng gestured with his hands. "You guys continue. I'll be right here. If you have any questions, you can ask me at any time." After he finished speaking, he sat on a stool and closed his eyes to rest. Of course, on the surface, he seemed to be resting. However, in reality, he had entered number one space to practice the combination of the 10,000 casting technique. The time of the young master's tournament was getting closer and closer. Lin Feng's days were getting shorter and shorter. He had to cherish every minute and every second to learn the combination of the 10,000 casting technique. Otherwise, not to mention getting a good name, he would be eliminated before he could enter the finals. Jianglong County, Hu Estate's crafting room. Hu Fei gathered his three most outstanding students. The one standing at the front was a simple and honest man, Taku Yong. There are only 3 months left until the young master's tournament. How are your preparations? Hu Fei looked at his proud students with a serious expression. The three of them replied in unison, "We're ready." "Taku Yong, what about you?" Hu Fei shifted his gaze to Taku Yong, who had lowered his head in silence. He frowned because he realized that Taku Yong seemed to be distracted. Hearing this, Taku Yong immediately came to his senses and hurriedly raised his head. "Teacher, I'm ready too." Hu Fei's brows were still knitted together as he said unhappily, "Are you ready?" "I don't think so." Taku Yong's heart skipped a beat. He said anxiously, "Teacher, I'm really ready. I'll definitely get a good result in the Youth Masters tournament." "Since you said you're ready, then let me ask you, why have you been so absent-minded all this time? Why did you take 2 days to master a technique that you could have mastered in 1 day?" Hu Fei was obviously very dissatisfied with Taku Yong's performance. "With your talent in refining, as long as you're willing to study seriously, you won't need to spend so much time to get such a result, right?" The other two students obediently lowered their heads, but there was a hint of gloating in their eyes. Although they were Hu Fei's most outstanding students, their talent in refining was much worse than Taku Yong's. For a long time, Taku Yong was like a mountain that was pressing down on their heads, constantly emitting a heavy pressure that made it hard for them to breathe. They were very jealous of Taku Yong, jealous of Taku Yong's talent in refining, and jealous of Taku Yong's position in Hu Fei's heart. Although they were Taku Yong's direct disciples, in actual fact, in terms of status, the two of them added together couldn't be compared to Taku Yong. Because Taku Yong was the most promising genius among the three of them to become a 4-star armament master. His talent in refining was even higher than Hu Fei himself by a little, and their talent in refining couldn't be compared to Hu Fei's. All along, Taku Yong had been their role model, and he was rarely reprimanded by Hu Fei. Today's situation was very rare, so they naturally had to be happy. If Hu Fei really gave up on Taku Yong, their status would naturally rise. Perhaps in the future, the one who would inherit Hu Fei's mantle would be one of them. But it was a pity that their wish was destined to be an extravagant hope. Hu Fei wouldn't give up on Ta Kuyong, this outstanding student, so easily. Ta Kuyong stammered, I also don't know. You don't know? Hu Fei flew into a rage and his anger grew. Ta Kuyong, you disappoint me too much. This sentence was already very heavy. This was also the first time that Ta Kuyong heard the word disappointment from Hu Fei's mouth. He immediately blamed himself. He said with shame, after I heard about Linfeng's matter, I had some feelings. So when I was studying, I always found it hard to concentrate. My ability is not as good as my heart's desire. Linfeng again. Hu Fei's face darkened as he asked, then tell me, what feelings do you have? Ta Kuyong spoke bluntly. I have always been thinking that Linfeng's talent is higher than mine, and he has a huge influence in Jianglong County. He is sought after by countless refiners and is unparalleled in the limelight. Originally, he could have displayed his skills in the young master's competition and his future was limitless. But after he was attacked and became a cripple, he instantly fell from the altar and was despised and ridiculed by countless people. Outside, people can hear people criticizing him. Some of the words, even I, an outsider, find it hard to bear. Hu Fei frowned. What does this have to do with you? Yes, this matter indeed has nothing to do with me. Ta Kuyong's face was filled with a tangled expression. But, if one day I also suffer such a serious injury and become a cripple, does that mean I will also end up like Linfeng? He clenched his fists and said in a low voice, even Linfeng ended up like this. If I am inferior to Linfeng, wouldn't my end be even more miserable? Stupid. Hu Fei reprimanded. Teacher. Ta Kuyong looked at Hu Fei with shame. Linfeng is Linfeng and you are you. Even if your talent in refining is not as good as his, you still have your own advantages. Why do you have to belittle yourself? Hu Fei stared at Ta Kuyong. His expression was extremely solemn and his tone was also very heavy. You are not Linfeng. Linfeng was attacked because he had no backing and no backing. His conduct was too ostentatious and he was in the limelight too much. You are calm and low-key, and your reputation is not prominent. Who would dare to attack you? Moreover, you are my, Hu Fei's, disciple. In this Jianglong County, who would dare to touch you? Even the county governor would not dare to touch my people easily. These words were extremely domineering. As a 4-star refiner, he indeed had the qualifications to say so. Saying this, his voice softened a little as he said, do your best. When you become a 4-star refiner, you will no longer have to worry about these problems. The influence of a 4-star refiner is not something you can imagine. Yes, teacher. Ta Kuyong respectfully replied. All right, you all can continue to practice. In the next few months, I will accompany you, answer your questions, and help you all improve. Hu Fei looked at his 3 disciples with expectation. You must not let me down. At the same time, Zhuo Bufan also accompanied his disciples and supervised their training. In the crafting room of the table residence, 2 youths were sweating profusely. The sound of clanking could be heard continuously. Even in the craftsmen's guild, the clear sound of forging could be heard frequently. Those geniuses who had been recruited by the craftsmen's guild had also set their sights on the young master's competition. They were determined to obtain a good ranking in the young master's competition. In this way, their status in the craftsmen's guild would also be greatly improved. If Jianglong County was already like this, then the Jingmen City province and other places would be even better. In the entire Greenwood continent, almost all the qualified refiners were working hard to train. Many young refiners in the Greenwood continent were madly and tirelessly training. This caused the continent to be shrouded in a heavy atmosphere. An invisible pressure rippled and acted on everyone. Even the earth warriors and earth mages who did not have the talent for refining, as well as the ordinary people, felt inexplicably nervous. The competition was about to begin. Everyone was actively preparing for it. No one thought that they were born worse than others, and the young masters' competition was their best stage. It was also an extremely rare opportunity to change their fate. The autumn wind seemed to be even colder. The aura floating in the air had already been tainted with a hint of winter. The vegetation was withered and the leaves were covered with frost. The thin mist blocked the sunlight. Looking up, one could only vaguely see the outline of the sun. Although it was not dazzling to the eyes, it was not as bright and beautiful as before. Even the mood of the people was as heavy as the gloomy weather. Qingfeng College. Lin Feng's days were very regular. In the morning, he would practice the combination of 10,000 forging techniques in the first space. In the afternoon, he would go to the crafting room to teach the students how to refine. In the evening, he would go to the crafting room exclusively for the instructors. While teaching the students how to refine, he would also practice in the first space. When it was late at night, he would return to the dormitory and concentrate on his practice. He used almost every minute and every second of his available time to practice. Sometimes, he would even spare some time to meet with Lin Yun. Such days were very fulfilling but also very tiring, because Lin Feng's consciousness never stopped to rest. He was extremely busy 24 hours a day. His consciousness had entered the state of overload. Even number one was a bit worried that his consciousness would have problems if it continued like this. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, 1 month had passed quietly. The combination of techniques is indeed much more difficult than the techniques themselves. When the sky just brightened, Lin Feng finished his practice for the night. A touch of worry flashed across his face. Another month has passed, but I have only mastered the combination of 2,862 technique. If it continues like this, I'm afraid that I won't be able to master the combination of 10,700 techniques before the Young Masters competition. There were only 2 months left before the Young Masters competition. Chapter 96. With Lin Feng's current rate of improvement, the situation was not optimistic. With a heavy heart, Lin Feng sighed softly and exited Space One. As usual, he went to the canteen to buy a bag of asparagus fruits and waited for Nono to eat before going to the cafeteria for breakfast. Just after breakfast, Qin Wulei found Lin Feng. New student assessment? Lin Feng nodded, indicating that he had heard about it. Is the assessment going to be held today? Lin Feng did not feel the slightest pressure regarding the new student assessment. The students of the refining class were progressing at an astonishing speed. In just a short month, they had all achieved good results. Compared to the second-year students, they might even be better. If they still could not pass the assessment, then he could only accept it. Can't pass the assessment? Lin Feng's lips curled. He had never considered this problem. Qin Wulei explained, the new student assessment is held once a month, 10 times a year. Today is exactly 1 month before the start of the semester, so the assessment is set to be today. Saying this, she glanced at Lin Feng and frowned. It's your first time teaching students in the academy. If their results are not good, it's understandable. You don't have to feel burdened. She comforted him in a low voice. The reason why she frowned was because Lin Feng had not asked her for help this month, nor did he ask any of the other mage teachers for help. In the past, any refining teacher would invite a mage to assist in teaching. With a mage partner, they could provide the best guidance to the mage students. Especially Wen Han, this genius mage student. As the most talented student in this batch of new students, the academy naturally attached great importance to her. But when she went to the dean, Xie Qiufeng, to bring this up, Xie Qiufeng rejected her suggestion, saying that Lin Feng must have his own ideas and outsiders should not interfere with his teaching. As for the results, they would know in a month. Now, a month had passed. Qin Wulei was still worried about Lin Feng. Psychological burden? Lin Feng chuckled. Don't worry, I've never had any psychological burden. Hearing this, A trace of helplessness appeared in Qin Wulei's heart. This Lin Feng, how come he doesn't care about his own matters at all? It was a waste of time for her to worry about him. She really couldn't do anything about him. Lin Feng asked, "By the way, when will the assessment be held? In the morning? In the afternoon? Do we need to go there?" "The assessment will be held in the morning. After the assessment, there will be no classes today." Qin Wulei pointed in the direction of the combat simulation field. The location of the assessment is the combat simulation field. The students have to participate, and it's mandatory. No one can avoid it for any reason. As for the mentors, there are no strict requirements, but it's best to participate. After all, these students are taught by you. "Oh, then I won't go." Lin Feng shook his head. "It just so happens that I'm a little busy. Since I don't have classes in the afternoon, I'll make use of it." Qin Wulei was speechless for a moment. She really wanted to ask, "What's more important than the assessment of the students that you teach? Don't you care about their assessment results at all?" But after thinking about it carefully, she and Lin Feng didn't have much interaction, and they couldn't be considered friends. Some things, naturally, were not easy to say. She opened her mouth and finally nodded helplessly. "All right then, that's it. And thank you for informing me so early in the morning." Lin Feng clasped his hand. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first." Watching Lin Feng's departing figure, Qin Wulei's mind was full of doubts. What exactly was Lin Feng busy with? Lin Feng was a cripple, he didn't need to cultivate, he didn't need to study, and she had never heard of Lin Feng having any businesses outside. Naturally, there was no need for Lin Feng to manage them. But Lin Feng's anxious look was indeed suspicious. What exactly was he busy with? What was it that made him so anxious? Could it be, he's worried about losing face when the assessment results come out, so he's deliberately avoiding me? After thinking for a while, Qin Wulei really couldn't figure it out, so she could only give up. Time passed by little. When Lin Feng returned to the dormitory to continue practicing the combination of skills, the field used for the simulation of actual combat was incomparably lively. The quality of the new students this time, compared to the previous years, was a little worse. However, the new student assessment this time was actually more lively and more eye-catching than the previous years. The one presiding over the assessment this time was the Vice Dean, Qin Wulei. The Dean, the leaders and vice leaders of the various grades, as well as many instructors from other classes, had all come to pay attention. In total, there were 23 instructors. 6 of them were refining instructors, the rest were warrior instructors or mage instructors, and there was only one instructor in charge of the simulation of actual combat training. 5 of the leaders and vice leaders of the various grades came, and 3 of them were absent. Including Xie Qiufeng and Qin Wulei, there were a total of 30 people. Strange, this assessment seems to be a little too lively, right? Xie Qiufeng looked at the numerous instructors thoughtfully. He faintly felt that many of the instructors were not here for the assessment, but had other purposes. This matter was full of abnormalities, but Xie Qiufeng couldn't figure out the reason for it at the moment. Many of the instructors were talking in low voices, occasionally raising their heads to look at a group of students, and then retracting their gazes and continuing to talk in low voices. At this time, all the students had arrived. After counting, Qin Wulei walked to Xie Qiufeng's side and said in a low voice, "Dean, can we begin?" Xie Qiufeng glanced at the instructors and said indifferently, "Okay, then let's begin." "Okay." Qin Wulei nodded, and then turned to look at the numerous students. He controlled his voice and tried to transmit it to the ears of every student as much as possible. "Everyone, please be quiet. The assessment is about to begin. I hope everyone will be prepared in advance. Now I will give everyone the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. Please prepare yourselves." Hearing this, the students quieted down one by one and began to prepare for the upcoming assessment. Some were stretching their muscles and bones, some were concentrating their mind. Many of the teachers who were chatting with each other also stopped. Their gazes all turned to look at him. If one were to observe carefully, it wouldn't be difficult to find that a large number of people were focused on the group of students in the refining class. The most eye-catching person in this group of instructors was no doubt the cultured and refined gentleman, Schwerin. Schwerin stood in front of the numerous instructors, with a faint smile on his lips. His appearance was outstanding and very charming. Why is he also here? Qin Wulei frowned. Hasn't he always been uninterested in the freshman assessment? After a moment, Qin Wulei pulled himself together and announced the start of the assessment. The first to participate in the assessment were the new students of the martial warrior specialization. There were a total of 4 classes, 3 of which had 40 people and the last class had 39 people, totaling 159 people. The process of the test was very simple. All they needed to do was reveal their full cultivation and punch the strength testing stone with their strongest strength. This would test their specific cultivation and strength. The process was very simple, but the number of people was not small. The 159 people took a full half an hour to complete the assessment. After the assessment, the staff in charge of recording immediately passed the recorded results to Qin Wulei. Qin Wulei then passed it to the dean, Xie Qiufeng. Xie Qiufeng took out another set of records and compared them. On the other side, the students of the mage class also began their assessment. Compared to the martial warrior assessment, the mage assessment was more troublesome. Not only did it have to test the time they cast spells, but it also had to test the power of the spells and the growth of their spiritual energy. Only by combining these 3 aspects could they roughly determine the speed of their improvement. The assessment here was in full swing. The students of the weapon forging class were bored to death. If they knew they would have to wait so long, perhaps they would not have come so early. Like the students of the weapon forging class, many of the teachers were also very bored. They whispered to each other and did not pay attention to the assessment situation here. Are they just here to join in the fun? Qin Wulei's face flashed a trace of suspicion. Xie Qiufeng had already finished comparing the 2 sets of records of the martial warrior class. His expression was neither happy nor worried. No one could tell if he was satisfied or not. He put the records aside and looked at the mage students who were undergoing their assessment. From the corner of his eyes, he seemed to have inadvertently seen a group of teachers. The suspicion between his brows was even stronger. However, he did not say anything and continued to wait quietly. Not long after, the mage students' assessment also ended. Next, it was the weapon forging class turn. The class that was most valued by the academy. It's about to begin, Schwerin reminded in a low voice. He focused his attention and looked at the students of the weapon forging class seriously. Hearing Schwerin's reminder, the instructors who were chatting behind him immediately stopped talking and turned their gazes over. Even the instructors who didn't have much of a relationship with Schwerin also perked up their spirits and observed him more seriously. Schwerin looked around and could not find Linfeng's figure. He could not help but feel disappointed. This guy is smart. He knew he would embarrass himself, so he decided not to come. He snorted lightly. However, even if you don't come, you will still be embarrassed. Don't worry, I will definitely help you. I will help you announce the results of the assessment to everyone. Your name will spread to every corner of Qinfeng College. His eyes flashed with a strange smile. Linfeng, oh Linfeng, this time, I would like to see if you can withstand it. Under the expectant gaze of the crowd, Qin Wulei stood in front of the group of students. He watched as the first student in line walked into the casting seat that they had prepared earlier. He slowly announced, "The assessment begins." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. All the teachers, the leaders of the various grades, the Dean Xie Qiufeng, and the group of students who had finished the assessment but had not left in time all looked over. Chapter 97. The student who was first in line for the assessment was shocked by the terrifying array of people before him. In front was Principal Xiechofeng, and not far from Xiechofeng were a few year group leaders. On the right was a group of teachers, which included quite a number of famous teachers. On the left was Vice Principal Qinwulei, and in the empty space behind was a group of students who had yet to leave. Everyone's gazes were focused on this place, and instantly, the pressure on the student was as heavy as a mountain as he couldn't help but feel nervous. It's just a freshman assessment, is there a need to create such a huge scene? The student had an urge to cry. Under such a situation, anyone would find it hard to maintain their composure. Even a genius like Wen Han was also muttering in his heart at this moment. The student suddenly recalled what Lin Feng had said before: armament refining is sacred and great. When you're refining, you must wholeheartedly immerse yourself in it and not be affected by any movements from the outside world. Unless your life is in danger, you must never care about what's happening in the outside world. Only with extreme focus will you be able to achieve the best result. These words were like a clear spring, blessing the dry earth, causing the nervousness in the student's heart to be slightly relieved as he slowly calmed down. Although he wasn't able to do what Lin Feng had said, but more or less there was still some effect. He took a deep breath and his expression turned solemn as he slowly squatted down and lit up the furnace. Boom! The fire burned fiercely and the fiery red sparks caused the student's tender face to turn red. Palm fire is not to blindly pursue high temperature, but to find a balance and find the most compatible point with the materials. The student recalled the words that Lin Feng had emphasized many times as he threw the materials into the furnace and slowly pulled the fan to feel the most compatible point between the temperature and the materials. He wasn't considered as outstanding in the first-year armament master class, but if placed elsewhere, his performance was impeccable. At least, for his age group, it was already considered as extremely rare. Looking at the process of his palm fire, Xiechofeng secretly nodded his head. Although there are still some flaws, but to a child, it's already extremely rare. This child should be one of the most outstanding students in the first-year armament master class, right? Several grade group leaders and vice group leaders also looked at this student in astonishment, revealing a hint of surprise. He didn't expect that there would be such an outstanding armament master student in the first year's armament master class. Just based on his palm fire ability, it should be comparable to the second year's students, right? And this child had only been exposed to refining for a month. I didn't expect Lin Feng's luck to be so good. The first one to appear is actually the most outstanding one in the armament master class. Schwerin muttered in disappointment. However, there can't be more than 3 students like this. He's definitely going to lose face today. Not only Schwerin, but the other instructors and grade leaders also thought the same. After all, this student's performance was indeed extraordinary. One look and anyone could tell that he was a good seedling. In terms of talent, he probably wouldn't lose to the few senior geniuses who were representing the academy in the Young Masters tournament. A smile appeared on Xiechofeng's face, and his expression relaxed. I've finally found another good seedling. I don't have to worry about this batch of new students being unpresentable. Unknowingly, the student had already finished refining the ordinary iron. A piece of iron was placed on the casting table. The real test is about to begin. Everyone's expression turned solemn as they stared at the spot without blinking, as if they were afraid of missing out on any details. The student also took in a deep breath as his expression became more and more solemn and serious. So much so that at this moment, he had already forgotten the existence of everyone around him. In his heart, there was only the material and the giant hammer in front of him. There was only this casting table, and what he needed to do was to display all the skills he knew, as usual, to remove the impurities from the material as much as possible, and to make the material reach the limit of what he could control. Ding! The crisp sound was like a ripple. With the casting site as the center, it spread out in all directions, layer by layer. This sound indicated that the student had truly begun to refine artifacts. He still remembered what Lin Feng had said before. Out of the three essentials of refining, skill was the most important. As for the rest, it was useless no matter how good one's mastery was. Only when one's skill was good enough could he forge a weapon that everyone was satisfied with. Otherwise, everything else would be in vain. With the giant hammer in his hand, after the first strike, it was followed by the second. The time interval in between was so short that it was hard to believe. So fast. Everyone's pupils shrank as they exclaimed in their hearts. Ding ding ding. Ding ding ding. In everyone's line of sight, the hammer strikes that were like a torrential downpour were filled with a violent beauty as they faithfully reproduced the entire forging process. No one was able to shift their gaze away at this moment because the students' forging had already tightly captured their eyes, causing them to be unwilling to shift their gaze away. A stunning style of technique. A forging that was filled with a violent beauty. Many people fell into intoxication as their gazes turned from scrutiny to admiration. This continuous 100 casting technique is not the normal sequence. An armament refining mentor couldn't help but exclaim. The chaotic technique was the combination of technique. Only by mastering the 107 techniques of the 100 casting technique would one be able to master the combination of technique. To these armament refining mentor, the combination of the 100 casting technique was naturally nothing much. They had even mastered the combination of the 1000 casting technique. But the key point was that the person who was displaying the combination of techniques was not them, but a student. A first-year freshman who had just come into contact with refining for a month. This was simply too unbelievable. Including Xiaqiufeng, everyone looked at this scene with incomparable shock. In less than a year's time, he had mastered 107 techniques of the 100 casting technique. Even the combination of techniques was mastered no less than 20 techniques. This student's talent in refining was simply too monstrous. Genius, he's indeed a genius. The few armament refining masters' gazes towards this student instantly turned fiery. If such a student were to be taught by them, then when this student achieved great achievements in the future, the credit would naturally be given to them. They didn't say anything, but their gazes towards this student were filled with fanaticism. No one knew what they were thinking, but one thing was for sure, this student had left a deep impression in their hearts. A stunning style of technique, as well as the terrifying innate talent of mastering 107 techniques and dozens of combinations of techniques in less than a month's time. They were determined to get this student. Very quickly, this student stopped forging as he looked innocently at Qin Wulei. Tutor Qin, I've finished forging. He had only mastered the combination of 27 techniques, so naturally it didn't take much time. After all, he had chosen to directly display the combination of techniques and not to display the 107 techniques of the 100 casting technique one by one. The smile on Shui Ren's face was extremely stiff. If one observed carefully, it wasn't hard to see the trace of anger in his eyes. This Lin Feng's luck is really good. Shui Ren clenched his fists and exhaled deeply as he spoke with difficulty. Luck? Perhaps in many people's eyes, Lin Feng's luck was indeed very good. You can leave first. Number 2. Qin Wulei was absent-minded for a moment until the student was almost impatient before he nodded his head and said, Next, let's invite the second student to take the assessment. The few armament tutors' gazes turned towards the student who had left the forging position and returned to the armament master class. If not for the fact that Shui Ren was right in front of them and Principal Xiaqiufeng and the various year leaders were watching from the side, they would have long disregarded their status and rushed over to snatch this student. For such a genius to stay in the first-year armament master class was simply a waste of his talent. Only when he fell into their hands and received their guidance would his terrifying innate talent not be wasted. Yes, in everyone's eyes, His innate talent had already reached an extremely terrifying level. Xiechufeng didn't mind. No matter who this student was taught by, he was still a student of Qinfeng College, so naturally he wouldn't mind. However, since this student was taught by Lin Feng first, so no matter how much these tutors wanted to take over, they had to first obtain Lin Feng's consent. Cough cough. Schwerin coughed softly and gestured to the few armament tutors behind him. The assessment has just begun. You guys, don't forget what I told you earlier. Hearing this, the few armament tutors calmed down a little and reluctantly withdrew their gazes and once again looked towards the forging position. At this moment, the second student had already begun the steps of palm fire. His palm fire ability was actually not inferior to the first student at all. The few armament tutors who had just seen this scene almost stared their eyeballs out. Could it be that this was another genius who wasn't inferior to the previous student? But was this true? Since when had geniuses become so rampant? Coincidence, this must be a coincidence. Many of the tutors thought so in their hearts. They would rather believe that it was a coincidence than dare to believe that such geniuses had become rampant. Chapter 98. Looking for recommendation votes, 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 looking for recommendation votes. A few of the refining instructors had strange expressions on their faces, but the rest of the instructors were even more surprised. As for Xiechufeng, he sat on the wooden chair at the top, his eyes bright as he seriously stared at the second student who was undergoing the assessment. He began to calculate in his heart, if this student's skills were not inferior to the first student's, then today's assessment would become very interesting. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, and a bright light occasionally flashed in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Everyone nearby stared at the second student who was undergoing the assessment. Their expressions were all different and their thoughts were all different. It can't be, this must be a coincidence. Schwerin clenched his fists, no longer able to remain calm. The reason why he invited so many instructors to pay attention to the assessment of the first years was not to help the students of the refiner class. It was just that the reality seemed to be gradually moving away from the track he had imagined and towards another direction. No matter what everyone was thinking, the second student had already finished the palm fire and the gathering and dispersing segment and had begun the third segment, forging. At this moment, everyone was staring at this place, their eyes flickering, and they were even more serious than before. They were both looking forward to it and were also a little afraid. Even they themselves did not know what they were afraid of. The student raised the giant hammer in his hand and also took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down and focus on forging. In between breaths, his emotions had already cooled down a lot. Although it was not to the extent of being as calm as an ancient well, it was very difficult for the gazes of the outside world to affect him. It's about time, he secretly said in his heart as he raised the giant hammer in his hand and hammered it with all his might. Ding! The sound of the giant hammer colliding with the iron was still so clear and melodious, like the clear spring of the mountain stream, or the deep pool of the blue sea, slowly entering one's ears. The next moment, that skill, which was like a torrential downpour, was reproduced by this student. Ding, 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 ding. The rhythmic and clear sound rippled out layer by layer, constantly knocking on everyone's eardrums. However, not only did this sound not make them feel annoyed, it was instead like the gentle hand of a wife, soothing the wounds in their hearts. Although they had already guessed it, when this scene really happened, everyone was still stunned on the spot. It was such a stunning style of technique. It was another technique that continuously disrupted the order. His speed was even faster than the first student. In just a few breaths of time, the student had already used more than 20 technique. After a little more time, he had already used 30 technique. Phew! It's finally done. The student heaved a sigh of relief. His face was brimming with a bright smile. He was quite satisfied with his performance. Most importantly, he did not embarrass his mentor. Revealing a smile to the students of the refiner class behind him, he clenched his right hand into a fist and raised it up. Then, his index finger and middle finger separated, making a signature gesture of victory. Then, he walked towards the other students and waited for the next student to take the test. When he walked into the class, everyone cupped their hands and congratulated him. Congratulations, your performance just now was very good. You didn't embarrass Hayashi-sensei. Good job. So many mentors are paying attention to our test. If we don't perform well, not only will we embarrass ourselves, we will also implicate Hayashi-sensei. For Hayashi-sensei and for ourselves we must show our best. These words were meant for the other party as well as for themselves. They cheered each other on in private and rubbed their shoulders. They were determined to show their best state and let these mentors see that the students taught by Hayashi-sensei were absolutely not bad. After a long time, the mentors, year group leaders, Xiechofeng and Qin Wulei finally regained their senses. Everyone looked at each other and saw the joy and shock in their eyes. Even Schwerin had to put on a happy look to prevent others from saying that he did not have a sense of collective honor. After all, they were all mentors of Qinfeng College. If Qinfeng College could produce a few outstanding geniuses, they would also feel particularly proud. This Lin Feng is really my lucky star. Xiechofeng sighed and was full of praise. There are 2 such geniuses in a row. In addition to Wen Han, who was very popular before, there are 3 extremely outstanding geniuses in the first-year refining class. The quality of these geniuses surpassed the previous batch of geniuses. Even Lin Feng's younger brother, Lin Yun, was slightly inferior. At least, from their performance they were indeed more outstanding than the other geniuses. The test was still going on. It had already been 15 minutes, but only 2 students had finished the test. This speed was indeed a bit slow. Qin Wulei was a bit absent-minded. His eyes flickered, and Lin Feng's indifferent look appeared in his mind. Could it be that he was completely confident, so he didn't bother to participate in the test? Qin Wulei had a question in his mind. Tutor Qin, you can begin. Xiechofeng reminded from the side. Qin Wulei, who had regained his senses, lightly nodded his head. He then looked towards the 3rd student who was eager to give it a try and said, "The test begins." That student quickly lit up the furnace and began the part where the fire was lit. Time passed by minute and second by second. The numerous instructors stared at this place without blinking. Their expressions were unprecedentedly serious. Ever since they became instructors of Qinfeng College, this was the first time they were so focused on the test of a student of the refining class. Back then, when they were teaching their own students, they had never paid so much attention to the test. Not long after, the 3rd student's forging was also completed. Everyone's gaze had already become lifeless. Just like that, they stared fixedly at the students of the refining class. Their eyes did not blink, and their bodies did not move at all. It was as if they had turned into statues. In the field specially used for the simulation of actual combat, an inexplicable atmosphere enveloped the place. Everyone's gaze had changed. The disbelief, and deep shock could not be concealed. Another one. No one knew who said with a dry throat. Then another hoarse voice sounded, "Genius." Another genius. Although they liked geniuses and favored geniuses, there were too many geniuses. On the contrary, they were terrified, because everything in front of them seemed so unreal. It was as if they were in a beautiful dream. At this time, Xiechofeng was also somewhat bewildered. It was already extremely rare for one of such geniuses to appear in each grade. It would be inconceivable if there were 2 of them. 3 of them. That was a little scary. Including Wen Han, there were 4 of them. 4 of them. Such a quality of geniuses had already surpassed the sum of all the geniuses of the same quality in Qinfeng College in the past few years. Calm down, calm down. Xie Qiufeng took a deep breath and suppressed his restless emotions. Then, he said to Qin Wulei again, continue. Qin Wulei, who was still in shock, came back to his senses after Xie Qiufeng's reminder. He announced again, the test continues. The fourth one, the fifth one, the sixth one. Today seemed to be a special day. High-quality geniuses appeared one after another. It was too much to take in. In fact, when it came to the 10th student, his talent was even more terrifying than that of the previous 9 students. He had actually mastered the combination of 107 skills. In other words, he was already worthy of being called a 2-star blacksmith. A 2-star blacksmith who had only been in contact with refining for a month. This talent was a little too terrifying. These instructors had never heard of such a genius in their entire lives. This made them wonder if they were dreaming. Was there really such a genius in the world? Even the monstrous genius Xiao Ran, who was famous in Jianglong County, didn't show such terrifying talent. Could it be that this little guy's talent is even more terrifying than that monstrous genius? Everyone looked at each other and subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. While they were still in shock, the test of the blacksmith class continued. They went through the test one after another without stopping. The 11th one, the 12th one, the 13th one. The performance of the geniuses didn't stop for even a moment. The number of geniuses was steadily increasing. Geniuses were finally overflowing. One of the instructors muttered out the thoughts of the other instructors in a low voice. Who can tell me that this group of students isn't from the first year's armament masterclass but are from the third years? They must be from the third years, they must be. The instructors tried their best to fabricate a lie to deceive themselves and comfort themselves. This group of first years had only been in contact with refining for a month, but they already had the ability to refine weapons as compared to the third years. If it was just 1 or 2, then it would be fine. If it was 3 or 4, then it would be terrifying. If it was 5 or 6, then it would be inconceivable. However, the students in this first year's armament master class were all extremely outstanding. Among them, there were some who were even more outstanding than the third years. With such a comparison, it was hard for everyone not to be shocked. But were there really so many geniuses in the world? Moreover, so many geniuses were coincidentally all gathered in the first year's armament master class? Things didn't seem to be that simple. Chapter 99. Please recommend us. 300,000 words. It's time to show our bayonets and stab at the recommendation ticket list, the forbidden area of the gurus. Just as the mentors thought, geniuses would not spread out, nor would they gather together. However, if so many geniuses had gathered together, then there was only one possibility. It was not that the students were innately talented, but that the mentors who taught them were extremely capable. These students were all taught by mentor Lin Feng. Many of the instructors immediately thought of the instructors of this group of students. As for the crafting instructors and Schwerin, their expressions were extremely ugly. Lin Feng. It was Lin Feng again. However, except for Schwerin, the other mentors of refining were not only looking awful, but their eyes were also full of shock and disbelief. That's right. The style of their techniques just now was exactly the style of Lin Feng in the rumors. One of the mentors said in a low voice, Lin Feng's style is so stunning, so violent, and so beautiful. I've only heard about it from other people before. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, I have to admit that the rumors are not exaggerating. On the contrary, only those who have seen such a style in person will know how fascinating it is. The mentors nodded slightly, agreeing with the mentor's speculation. At the same time, they thought to themselves, if his students have mastered such amazing techniques, what about him? They suddenly realized that they didn't dare to think further. Many teachers were ashamed of their past thoughts. There is no doubt about instructor Lin Feng's teaching ability. He is completely worthy of the conditions that the headmaster has set for him. With his teaching ability, the Qingfeng Academy will not be able to keep him. Perhaps only the top few academies in the capital city will be his final destination. It was ridiculous that they had targeted Lin Feng and talked bad about Lin Feng behind his back and made up stories about Lin Feng. Now that they thought about it, it was truly hilarious. They felt that their behavior was like that of a clown, which was extremely childish. The mentors of refining glanced at the students of the refining class with complicated expressions. Then, they slowly withdrew their gazes and looked at Xueren. Suddenly, they realized that compared to Lin Feng, Xueren, who was known as the #1 refining mentor of Qingfeng College, was not worth following. Compared to Lin Feng, Xueren's teaching ability was completely destroyed, and Xueren's character was even worse. If they didn't compare, they wouldn't know. But if they did, they would be shocked. Everyone had different expressions, each with their own thoughts. However, the students of the Armament Master class were incomparably refreshed in their hearts, especially when they saw the constantly changing expressions of the group of mentors. They were even happier. Are you dumbfounded? Now you realize that Hayashi-sensei is more awesome than all of you, right? Who told you to look down on Hayashi-sensei? Now you know how awesome Hayashi-sensei is, right? It was not in vain that I held back for so long. I was determined to use all my skills in one go today. The group of students seemed to have inherited Lin Feng's character. Although they were gloating in their hearts, they did not show much movement on the surface. They only congratulated each other and encouraged each other. Then, they quieted down, as if they were not excited about their wonderful performance at all. Looking at their expressions, one could vaguely see a trace of indifference that was similar to Lin Feng's usual. These students had already been marked with Lin Feng's label. Dean Xiechufeng waved his hand, stopping the discussion of the mentors. He said to Qin Wulei, "There is still one student who has not taken the assessment. Everything can be discussed after the assessment." Qin Wulei was in a daze. After responding in a low voice, he announced again, "The assessment will continue." The last one was naturally the ace student of the first-year refining class, Wen Han. As the one and only prodigy in the weapon refinement class of the first years, Wen Han's talent was already very close to Xiao Ran's. Before he had entered the Clear Wind Academy, he was already a 2-star weapon refinement master. Now that he had received Lin Feng's guidance, the speed of his improvement had reached a shocking level. His talent in cultivation as an earth sorcerer was already frightening enough, but his talent in weapon refinement was even more amazing. When it was Wen Han's turn to go on stage, everyone around focused their attention again. Wen Han's talent had long been known among the instructors and students. When Wen Han had participated in Qingfeng College's recruitment assessment, his performance could be said to be extremely stunning. He had left a deep impression in the hearts of many mentors. They were very much looking forward to seeing how far this genius would go under Lin Feng's guidance. Very quickly, Wen Han's assessment had already begun. Palm fire, gathering and dispersing segments were almost perfect without any flaws. Even Fu Yi under Lin Feng's tutelage could not do better than Wen Han. His performance did not disappoint everyone. However, what everyone was looking forward to was his performance in terms of technique. How would he perform? Very quickly, he used practical actions to prove that he did not disappoint the name of a genius. The combination of the 107 techniques of 100 casting was easily completed by him. The process was extremely simple and easy. At the same time, it was filled with a unique, violent beauty. Those originally elegant and aristocratic sorcery movements were interpreted by him to have a unique, violent meaning. Extreme speed, unparalleled passion, throughout the entire process of his forging. As expected, he has already mastered the combination of the 100 casting techniques. The mentors were not surprised in the slightest. since even those students who were slightly less talented could master the combination of the 100 casting techniques, Wen Han would naturally not be worse than them. I just don't know how much he has achieved in the 1,000 casting technique. They saw Wen Han put the iron aside and take the terrace from not far away. He was going to use the 1,000 casting technique. Everyone's eyes were deeply fixed on Wen Han, unwilling to miss any second of the excitement. Not long after, the palm fire and dispersing segment ended. The corners of Wen Han's mouth twitched slightly, and the obscure incantation was almost inaudible. Ding! The first technique. Everyone subconsciously began to count. They were eager to know how many 1,000 casting techniques Wen Han had mastered. Ding, ding, ding. It was different from the forging of weapons by martial artists. The forging speed of mages was much slower. However, Wen Han's speed was already very rare. He was much faster than the forging speed of those high-level mages. Even when compared to these martial artist forging instructors, Wen Han's forging speed was not slow at all. The second, the third, the fourth. Everyone counted silently in their hearts, and their eyes did not even blink. At some point, all the mentors had come close and surrounded Wen Han. Even the dean, Xie Qiufeng, and the vice dean, Qin Wulei, were standing not far away. They surrounded the place so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. They were desperately trying to squeeze in, wanting to see more clearly and count more clearly. The students of the weapon refinement class seemed to have expected this and walked further away with expectant smiles on their faces. They were not looking forward to Wen Han's performance, but looking forward to what kind of expression the group of mentors would have after Wen Han finished refining. It would be very interesting, right? The 354th technique. The 438th technique. Occasionally, the mentors' low murmurs could be heard from all around. The 523rd technique. The 552nd technique. Sporadic gasps could be heard from the group of mentors. The 635th technique. Finally, at the 743th technique, Wen Han stopped. He no longer cast spells. The giant hammer also fell with a bang and smashed onto the casting table. Without any complacency or excitement, he just calmly and quietly turned around and returned to the class. And the group of mentors once again fell into a daze. The gasps of cold air could be heard one after another. A 13-year-old child had already grasped the complete combination of the white casting technique, as well as the 743 techniques of the 1,000 casting technique. Such an outcome made many of the mentors feel ashamed. They felt that they had wasted their years living like dogs. With Wen Han's speed of improvement in less than a year, he could possibly surpass them. This first-year weapon refinement class is too terrifying. Although they didn't want to admit it, but the group of mentors had no choice but to admit it. One of the weapon refinement mentors said bitterly, "This group of students, their overall weapon refinement ability is even better than the students in my class." One must know that he was the weapon refinement mentor of the third-year weapon refinement class. At this moment, no one dared to question Lin Feng's teaching ability. The result in front of their eyes had already proved that even if Lin Feng had become a cripple, his teaching ability was still enough to throw them several streets away. That Lin Feng is simply a monster. What a terrifying teaching ability. Perhaps in his hands, even a person without any talent in weapon refinement would be trained by him to be not much worse than those weapon refinement geniuses. Now I finally understand why he only used a short span of a month to raise a group of old blacksmiths to become Samsung weapon refinement masters. Some people, even if they have become a cripple, still cannot be underestimated. For example, Lin Feng. Many of the mentors were discussing fervently, feeling ashamed of their past actions. However, there was one person who did not reflect on his own mistakes like them. This person was Xueren. At this moment, Xueren had completely lost his usual modest and gentlemanly appearance. His eyes were completely red like a gambler that had gone red from losing, and his eyes flickered with a crazed expression that carried a trace of resentment and rage. This time, he had lost. He had lost completely. Not only did he not cause any trouble for Lin Feng, he had instead sent Lin Feng to the altar. Chapter 100. Charging into the forbidden zone of the gods, summoning recommendation tickets, Xueren's face was extremely gloomy. He looked at the few refining mentors beside him, as well as some of the warrior mentors and mage mentors, and said, "Don't forget that the reason I invited you here is not to praise Lin Feng. Even if he wanted to praise him, it would be to praise him to death. According to his character in the past, he would not easily say such hateful words. But at this moment, he had been blinded by anger and ignored the emotions of the mentors. Teacher Xue, that's not right." The surrounding mentors' faces were also not very good. One of them said seriously, "We have a good relationship with you. Moreover, we did not know that Mentor Lin Feng was a real talent before. We thought that he had really snuck in by relying on his connections and luck, as you said. That's why we accepted your invitation and came to help. Now, it has been proven that Mentor Lin Feng does indeed have extraordinary teaching abilities. Naturally, we have no reason to target him." Another mentor echoed, "That's right. Although we are not gentlemen, we are not despicable people either. Even if we are somewhat envious of Mentor Lin Feng, we will not use such despicable means to frame him." The oldest mentor among them took a deep look at Xueren and said, "Teacher Xue, with your tolerance, you won't hold a grudge against Mentor Lin Feng, will you?" Hearing this, the mentors all looked at Xueren. All along, Xueren had shown the appearance of a modest gentleman. No matter what happened, he would not bicker with others. But this time, Xueren's behavior was extremely abnormal. It was as if the Xueren they were familiar with was not the same person. Could it be that this was Xueren's true colors? Xueren was startled. A hint of anger flashed in his eyes, but on the surface, he immediately showed a hint of shame. He repeatedly apologized. "I'm sorry, mentors. I was wrong just now. I did not expect Mentor Lin Feng's teaching ability to be so amazing. I was too jealous and lost myself." Seeing his sincere apology, the expressions of the group of instructors eased a little. Thinking of Xueren's usual behavior, they let go of their grudges and no longer blamed Xueren. Moreover, they could understand Xueren's feelings. After all, Xueren was originally the #1 refining instructor in Qingfeng College. Now that Lin Feng was here, Xueren was about to lose a lot of things. Even they were a little jealous, let alone Xueren. Since Xueren had lowered his head and admitted his mistake and reflected on himself, there was no need for everyone to hold on to this matter any longer. "Forget it. I understand Teacher Xue's feelings. Let's drop this matter. Don't mention it again in the future." The older instructor waved his hand. After that, no one pursued Xueren's mistake. However, Xueren could not stop resenting these instructors. In a corner where no one could see, Xueren looked at the group of instructors and clenched his teeth. A bunch of traitors! Originally, these instructors were invited by him to deal with Lin Feng, but now they turned around and pursued his fault. Their words were so dignified. How could he swallow this anger? The person he had invited was supporting his enemy. How ironic was this? Xueren looked at the group of mentors with a sinister expression and muttered, "Soon, I'll be able to get my hands on it very soon. Once I get my hands on it, all of you old farts will die." After a long time, many students and instructors left one after another. Although the freshman assessment was over, the excitement in their hearts did not subside for a long time. In the entire simulation field, except for Xie Qiufeng and Qin Wulei, there were only a few instructors who were responsible for cleaning the field. "Wulei, what do you think of Lin Feng?" Xie Qiufeng suddenly asked. Qin Wulei was startled. He looked at Xie Qiufeng with a puzzled gaze. Seeing that he did not have any special expression, he could not guess his thoughts. He could only carefully answer, Instructor Lin Feng's teaching ability is not bad. Xie Qiufeng shook his head and said, Not bad? He stood up and his gaze fell on the far wall. His thoughts were far away as if he was thinking about something. After a long time, he turned to Qin Wulei and said, Please go and inform Lin Feng to come to the dean's office to find me. Okay. Qin Wulei did not ask for the reason. He nodded and agreed. I'll go back first. I'll trouble you to deal with the matters here. Dean, take care. When Xie Qiufeng's figure disappeared at the entrance of the simulation field, Qin Wulei frowned and pondered deeply. What did Xie Qiufeng want from Lin Feng? Looking at Xie Qiufeng's tone and expression, it seemed that there was something important that he wanted to hand over to Lin Feng. Thinking so, Qin Wulei's face showed a trace of worry. He did not know why, but he had a bad premonition in his heart. I hope I'm thinking too much. Qin Wulei sighed softly. After half an hour, Qin Wulei finished dealing with the matters of the new student's assessment. He went to the dormitory area to find Lin Feng. After briefly explaining the purpose of his visit, Qin Wulei did not say much and hurriedly left. The dean is looking for me? Lin Feng's mouth showed a trace of helplessness. I don't know how much noise those little bastards made. I'm afraid they alarmed a lot of people? Lin Feng stopped practicing and went directly to the dean's office. Along the way, he occasionally met a few instructors. The strange expressions on their faces confirmed Lin Feng's guess. After entering the dean's office, Xie Qiufeng said enthusiastically, Instructor Lin Feng, you're here. Come, sit. Lin Feng was quite flattered. He was not used to Xie Qiufeng's enthusiasm. After Lin Feng sat down, Xie Qiufeng also sat back in his wooden chair. He asked casually, Instructor Lin Feng has been in Qinfeng College for a while. Is there anything you're not used to or inconvenient? No. Lin Feng shook his head. It's very good here. I'm very used to living here. Hearing this, Xie Qiufeng laughed. That's good. If you have any trouble, you can come to me at any time. As long as it doesn't violate the principles of Qinfeng College, I'll definitely help you. Lin Feng thanked him softly. Thank you, Dean. If I have any trouble, I'll definitely come to you for help. He was like a monk. He really could not guess Xie Qiufeng's intention. This old fox came here and talked nonsense. Who could understand his thoughts? After a few words of greeting, Xie Qiufeng finally got to the point. He said solemnly, I asked Instructor Lin Feng to come here mainly to ask Instructor Lin Feng for a favor. Dean, you must be joking. If even you can't solve it, how can Lin Feng help? Looking at Xie Qiufeng's expression, Lin Feng knew that this was not a simple matter. There was a hint of evasiveness in his words. After all, if even Xie Qiufeng could not solve it, how could he? Even if he could solve it, it would take a lot of energy. Now that the young master's competition was about to start, how could he spare so much energy? Instructor Lin Feng, you don't have to be so modest. In the whole Qinfeng College, except for Instructor Lin Feng, I'm afraid no one can help, Xie Qiufeng said. Lin Feng hesitated for a moment before saying, In that case, why don't you tell me what it is first? After all, he owed Xie Qiufeng a favor. He could not refuse too much. I wonder if Instructor Lin Feng has heard of the Young Masters competition? Xie Qiufeng asked. The Young Masters competition is the most important competition for blacksmith. Of course, Lin Feng has heard of it. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat, but he still pretended to be calm and answered. Looking at Lin Feng's strange expression, Xie Qiufeng was relieved. He smiled and said, Every Young Masters competition, Qinfeng College will send the best blacksmiths in the college to participate. We don't expect to get a good ranking. We only hope to participate in such a grand competition. At the same time, it is the best training for the student. If a student is lucky enough to stand out in the preliminary competition, it will be a great blessing for our Qinfeng College. Hearing Xie Qiufeng's words, Lin Feng was slightly relieved. He thought Xie Qiufeng was hinting that he was going to participate in the young master's competition. This is a tradition that has been passed down for hundreds of years in Qinfeng College, and it will continue to be passed down. Xie Qiufeng looked at Lin Feng with a serious expression. Every young master's competition, we will choose an instructor to lead the team. He will be responsible for teaching, restraining, supervising, and taking care of the participating students. This instructor must be a blacksmithing instructor in Qinfeng College. At the same time, he must have the ability to teach and be recognized by others. Lin Feng looked at Xie Qiufeng in confusion. Originally, the instructor in Qinfeng College had been decided to be Xueren, teacher Xue. When the name Xueren was mentioned, a cold light flashed in Xie Qiufeng's eyes. But in the blink of an eye, his face was full of smiles again. But now I have found a more suitable candidate. Me? Lin Feng's mouth was agape as he pointed at himself, incomparably shocked. Xie Qiufeng nodded heavily. Yes, it's you, Instructor Lin Feng. Your outstanding teaching ability has conquered all the instructors. I believe that no one in Qinfeng College is more suitable than you. Teacher Xue is not bad, but compared to you, he is not worth mentioning. His eyes were full of wisdom, giving Lin Feng the illusion that he had seen through his thoughts. Lin Feng suddenly felt a heavy pressure. He asked in a deep voice, "If I am the instructor in charge, what do I have to do?" You can rest assured about this. Other than what I have just mentioned, you basically don't have to do anything. You still have a lot of free time. Xie Qiufeng seemed to know what Lin Feng was worried about. He directly dispelled Lin Feng's worries. Your assistant will take care of everything else. You don't have to worry about it. Lin Feng frowned. He had a feeling that Xie Qiufeng was hiding something. Chapter 101. Surprise. Thank you, Ji Qingyang, for your generous gift to Piaohong. Congratulations to you, Ji Qingyang, for becoming the second leader of this book. The internet was disconnected in the afternoon and I only paid at night. I'm sorry for being late. Please continue to request for recommendation ticket. Please provide a large number of recommendation tickets. Lin Feng walked out of the dean's office with a troubled look on his face. Not far away, Qin Wulei stood at the door of a house across the street. He stood there for a long time, and the bad feeling in his heart grew stronger. In the dean's office, Xie Qiufeng sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. Smelling the delicate fragrance of the tea, he smiled gently. That smile was as if a heavy shackle had been unlocked. It was so relieved and relaxed. Xueren's background is unknown. He is full of mystery. He is most likely here for that thing. If I let him be the lead instructor, wouldn't that be exactly what he wants? Xie Qiufeng glanced at the house across the street. However, the window was too high and he could only see the eaves of the house. Qin Wulei and Xueren seemed to have a close relationship. If it weren't for Qin Wulei, how could Xueren become Qinfeng College's chief weapon forger in just a year? Even though Qinfeng College did not have a chief weapon forger, Xueren's current status among the students was no different from that of the chief weapon forger. His eyes flashed with a dangerous signal. If you are honest, I will pretend that nothing happened. However, if you have evil intentions and try to steal that thing, don't blame me for being ruthless. As long as the mysterious sorcerer did not appear, no one in Qinfeng College was a match for him. As for the mysterious sorcerer, he had already ordered people to investigate, but they did not find out his identity. However, he thought that he must be here for that thing as well. Most likely, he was not in cahoots with Qin Wulei and Xueren. Otherwise, with their strength, they could have just robbed him directly. Why would they go through so much trouble? Wine and lust blinded one's eyes. Money and silk moved one's heart. Who knew how many people were secretly watching? The azure sky, the water surface that stretched as far as the eye could see, and the huge waves surged endlessly. Such a scene could only be seen on the surface of the sea. A large, luxurious ship was sailing on the surface of the sea. From time to time, the cries of seabirds could be heard. It was strangely peaceful. On the deck, a masked man stood upright. His green robe swayed gently with the sea breeze. The man stood motionless, staring into the distance like a statue. "Junior Brother Shao." A respectful voice came from behind. The person who came was slightly older, but his status was slightly lower. He was also dressed in a green robe, with a 9-dragon pendant hanging from his waist. His long hair was simply tossed over his head. The man nodded slightly and asked, "How much longer?" "It will take about 20 days to get to East Yellow Island. We'll stay there for 2 days. Then, we'll depart from East Yellow Island and arrive at the mainland. It will take about 15 days. That's a total of 37 days. The young man remained respectful. A trace of disappointment flashed through the man's eyes when he heard this. He sighed and said, "Tell them to speed up as much as possible. We have to get to Eastern Yellow Island as soon as possible. We can't fail the mission that teacher gave us." The young man lowered his head and said, "All right." Turning his head, the man gazed into the distance again. His eyes were filled with nostalgia and shame. At the same time, there was also some anticipation. It was very contradictory. "It's been 2 whole years. I wonder how old foster father and the others are doing?" He was like a wanderer far away from home. Finally, the day had come when he would return home. He was filled with anticipation and excitement, but he was also somewhat nervous and ashamed. On the other side of the deck stood a group of men and women who were also dressed in green robes. Most of them were middle-aged, and only a few were young. Although they were conversing with each other, their gazes would always inadvertently glance over. This man was their junior brother, as well as their teacher's last disciple. However, his status was far higher than theirs. This was because this man had displayed extremely terrifying talent in the past 2 years. Very few people in the entire sect could compare to him. In the sect's artifact refining competition not long ago, this man's performance was extremely stunning. Not only did he obtain the title of newcomer king among the new generation of disciples, he even challenged those above his level and obtained 3rd place in the entire sect's younger generation. It had been a long time since someone had obtained such a result. The last time a disciple of the sect obtained such a result was 300 years ago. At that time, there was a disciple named Lin Xiong, whose performance was even more outstanding than Shao Ran's. Unfortunately, that senior mysteriously disappeared later on, and no one knew where he went. I heard that junior brother Shao is from the Greenwood continent. He was brought back 2 years ago by the sect's outer court deacon. Later on, his talent was noticed by our teacher, and he was able to become our teacher's disciple. That's right. There are many geniuses in the Greenwood continent. Junior brother Shao came from there. However, now that junior brother Shao has received a lot of training from the sect, he has improved rapidly in the past 2 years. He is getting closer and closer to becoming a 5-star artifact refiner. I'm afraid that those geniuses can only look up to junior brother Shao forever. In my opinion, the Youth Master competition is not worth our attention. I don't believe that there will be a genius more monstrous than junior brother Shao in the Youth Master competition. They naturally held junior brother Shao in high esteem. As for the Youth Master competition, they did not care much about it. It was just that their teacher had received an invitation to the Youth Master competition to be a judge, so they had no choice but to follow. There were countless genius artifact refiners in their sect, so they naturally did not have much interest in geniuses. The man stood on the deck and looked around for a long time. Finally, he retracted his gaze and quietly walked back to the main hall of the ship. He sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and quietly cultivated. Junior brother Xiao is too hard-working. A middle-aged man could not help but sigh. With junior brother Zhao's talent and his hard work, it would be unreasonable if he still could not rise up. The rest of the people nodded in agreement. Time passed slowly, and the giant ship slowly approached the East Yellow Island outside the Greenwood continent. Qingfeng College. In the instructor's crafting room, Lin Feng practiced while guiding Fu Yi and the others in crafting. Ever since he became the instructor of the freshman crafting class, Lin Feng's life had not changed. He repeated the same thing every day, teaching students, teaching disciples, and practicing technique. He had never stepped out of Qingfeng College. This was his entire life. There are still 2 months left. Lin Feng silently calculated the time. Although his body had not fully recovered, according to Number One's analysis, as long as he persisted in cultivating for an hour every day, it would take him at most 2 months to fully recover. 2 months was also the time when the Youth Master competition would begin. This was undoubtedly good news for Lin Feng. After all, no one knew if his injuries would worsen if he participated in the competition, resulting in irreversible consequences. As for techniques, he had already increased the number of techniques to 3,521 in the past few days. An invisible sense of urgency surrounded him, making him unable to breathe for even a moment. He could only work harder and harder. While Lin Feng was teaching Fu Yi and the other disciples, on the other side, many people had gathered in the dean's office. Among them, there were 2 faces that Lin Feng was familiar with. They were Qin Wulei and Xueren. In addition, all the instructors of crafting in Qingfeng College, as well as the year group leaders of each grade, were present. Today, I gathered you here to inform you of something. Xie Qiufeng looked around. After much consideration, I have finally decided that in the Youth Master competition in 2 months, the instructor of Qingfeng College will be led by instructor Lin Feng. Everyone was surprised. Didn't they agree to let teacher Xueren, lead the team? Why did he change his mind now? No! Xueren's expression changed instantly, but he immediately concealed his expression and expressed his objection in a heavy tone. Dean, that Lin Feng has only been in the college for 2 months. In terms of experience, he is still lacking. Moreover, Lin Feng is still young. The other students may not be convinced by him. If even the students are not convinced by him, it will be useless no matter how good his teaching ability is. Qin Wulei's eyes flashed with disappointment and disgust. She glanced at Xueren. She was even more dissatisfied with this hypocrite in front of her. Although she loathed Xueren very much in her heart, business was more important. She had no choice but to agree with Xueren. I think that instructor Xueren's words aren't wrong. Instructor Lin Feng's teaching ability is indeed very outstanding. No one can deny this point. However, instructor Lin Feng's experience is shallow, and it's difficult for him to convince the masses. Moreover, those students are arrogant and haughty. None of them are good people. I'm afraid that instructor Lin Feng won't be able to suppress them. Although supporting Xueren at this moment might expose his identity, Qin Wulei had no other choice. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but nod. Xueren and Qin Wulei's words were indeed reasonable. Dean, I think teacher Xue and tutor Qin's words are reasonable, a middle-aged man said in a deep voice. The rest of the people nodded in agreement. They had no enmity with Lin Feng. Naturally, they wouldn't target Lin Feng. Considering the overall situation, teacher Xue was more suitable. Xie Qiufeng chuckled. I think that the issue of qualifications shouldn't be considered by anyone here. He pointed at Qin Wulei and Xueren. Tutor Qin, teacher Xue, it's pardonable for others to say this. However, it's not right for the 2 of you to say this. He criticized them. Back then, tutor Qin was also promoted by me. In just 3 years, he became the dean of Qingfeng College. Has anyone ever said that you don't have enough qualifications? And you, teacher Xue, although you weren't promoted by me, tutor Qin must have put in a lot of effort, right? In just 1 year, you became the chief craftsman of Qinfeng College. All the craftsman instructors respect you and listen to your orders. Has anyone ever said that you don't have enough qualifications? Hearing this, the two of them were immediately speechless. Back then, I didn't consider your qualifications. Now, you want to consider other people's qualifications. Haha. Xie Qiufeng shook his head with a smile. What you're doing is somewhat disappointing. Chapter 102. The way Xie Qiufeng looked at the two of them had an unfathomable change. When Qin Wulei first entered Qinfeng College, he admired him. Although he did not trust him, he did not suspect him for no reason. However, when Xueren entered Qinfeng College, Qin Wulei used his position to secretly help Xueren build up his reputation. He even helped Xueren become the chief blacksmith. This made him suspicious. All this time, he did not have any solid evidence. He could only keep his suspicions in his heart. However, as the start of the young master's tournament approached, he noticed that Qin Wulei and Xueren communicated more often. It was as if they were secretly plotting something. From then on, he became even more suspicious. Later on, a mysterious and powerful mage suddenly came to Qinfeng College. This confirmed his suspicions. Therefore, whether or not Lin Feng was there, he would not let Xueren become a mentor. However, with Lin Feng, he could change his mind openly. He did not even need to use any extra excuses. This time, he had made his words very unpleasant. It was also considered as giving the two of them one last chance. If the two of them did not repent and were still thinking about that thing, he would take action. The surrounding mentors were also speechless after hearing the dean's words. This was because it was not just Qin Wulei and Xueren. Most of them were actually promoted by Xie Qiufeng. Many of them were not even considered as mentors. Later on, they were chosen by Xie Qiufeng and became mentors. They were promoted step by step until they became year leaders. Their status in Qinfeng College was only second to the two deans. In terms of qualifications, they were also not qualified to judge Lin Feng. The dean is right. We do not need to consider qualifications. The Year 4 mentor leader nodded. The rest of the mentors nodded as well. There was no need to discuss this point. Qin Wulei lowered his head and pondered. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. Xueren could not hold it in anymore. He had been here for 3 years. Wasn't it to be a mentor and seize the opportunity to snatch the target? Now, the target that was in his hands was gone. How could he accept it? We are us. Lin Feng is Lin Feng. How can we mix them together? Xueren had never said something so stupid before. However, this time, he did not care so much. He wanted to argue with reason. I'm not boasting. Other than my teaching ability is slightly worse than Lin Feng's, which part of me is better than him? Although Lin Feng has good teaching ability, he is nothing in other aspect. He is even a cripple. The more he spoke, the more confident he became. Think about it carefully. If Lin Feng were to lead the team, putting aside the fact that he might not be able to reach the destination safely with his current physical condition, just the fact that he is a cripple would make him a laughingstock if word got out. They would laugh at our Clear Wind Academy for not being able to find a suitable mentor to lead the team and letting a cripple lead the team in the end. Teacher Xue, you are exaggerating. Xie Qiufeng looked at Xueren unhappily. The rest of the instructors also frowned as they looked at Xueren. He was usually a gentleman, but at this moment, he kept calling Lin Feng a cripple. It was really against the way of a gentleman to talk about Lin Feng behind his back. Even Qin Wulei could not stand it anymore and felt ashamed for him. Teacher Xue, calm down. If you have something to say, we can talk about it. There is no need to be so agitated. Qin Wulei reminded him. Calm down? How do you expect me to calm down? Xueren's expression was very ugly, and he was very agitated. Dean, before this we had already decided that I would be the mentor leading the team. However, now that you have suddenly changed your mind, what do you think of me? If this were to spread, how would others view me? Xie Qiufeng's expression softened. He said, I am indeed sorry for Teacher Shui. However, his tone suddenly changed. However, I decided to let Lin Feng be the mentor after careful consideration. If Teacher Shui is affected in any way, I can make the decision to compensate Teacher Shui. I don't want any compensation. I just want to be the mentor leading the team. Xueren did not give in. Moreover, I have already contacted those students and obtained their approval. Now that it is Lin Feng, I am afraid that those students will not listen to his arrangement. I don't think so. Xie Qiufeng was calm and smiled. In terms of talent, Wen Han is more talented than those students. In terms of personality, Wen Han is more arrogant. However, this genius was also subdued by Lin Feng. After he finished speaking, the smile on his face disappeared and his expression became serious. He said lightly, also, I am only informing you and announcing the results. I am not asking for your opinions. He looked around and a faint aura enveloped the dean's office. If you are dissatisfied with my decision, you can choose to leave Qingfeng College at any time. Qingfeng College is a free college. No one will force you to stay. Xie Qiufeng looked at everyone coldly. At this moment, the power and domineering aura of a dean was completely revealed. I hope you remember that I am the dean here. At this moment, no one dared to treat Xie Qiufeng as an old man who was about to die. Instead, he was a powerful martial artist of the 6th rank. Moreover, this martial artist of the 6th rank held great power. He was the dean of a junior college recognized by the empire. Everyone held their breaths and kept quiet out of fear. Xueren's face was pale. A strong pressure targeted his body, making it difficult for him to move and breathe. Humph! Xie Qiufeng snorted again. Only then did that formless aura recede like the tide. He sat back on the wooden chair and waved his hand. I have finished announcing the matter. You can leave now. He glanced at Xueren. Of course, if anyone wants to leave Qingfeng College, you can stay and find me to go through the withdrawal procedures and take your personal files. In the end, everyone left silently, and Xueren also shamelessly left with his head lowered. Qin Wulei, don't you want to think of a way? After walking out of the dean's office, Xueren followed Qin Wulei into the opposite house. As soon as he entered the house, he asked in a questioning tone. Qin Wulei quietly looked at Xueren, as if he wanted to see through Xueren. After a long time, when Xueren could no longer withstand her gaze, she said indifferently, Now that things have come to this point, what else can we do? Xueren said in a low voice, Qin Wulei, don't forget why you and I are here. If we fail the mission, our future in the family will not be easy. So what? Qin Wulei frowned. She finally couldn't hide her disgust for Xueren. If it weren't for you, how could this mission have failed? These words indicated that the peaceful relationship between the two of them had officially broken down. Hearing this, Xueren was flustered and exasperated. With a dark face he said, Qin Wulei, you better make yourself clear today. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Why don't you show me your impoliteness? Qin Wulei snorted. Other than relying on your protective uncle, what else can you do? You. Xueren clenched his fist. His face was red with anger, and his eyes were full of anger. When you first came to the school, I repeatedly warned you not to look for me if it wasn't necessary. I didn't want to expose our identities and arouse Xie Qiufeng's vigilance. Qin Wulei said leisurely, but not only did you not listen, you even came to see me frequently. You even deliberately spread the news, as if you were afraid that others wouldn't know that we were close. I really don't know what your intentions are. At this point, she couldn't help but laugh bitterly. 6 years. It's been 6 years since I entered Qingfeng College. In these 6 years, I've always been careful. I've always wanted to complete the mission and go home as soon as possible. But now, because of you, all of my efforts have been in vain. My mission has also failed at the last step." At this point, she looked at Schwerin. "Do you know what it's like to be alone and without anyone to rely on for 6 years? 6 years of wandering outside, 6 years of being in fear?" Without waiting for Schwerin to reply, she shook her head. "No, you don't understand. Your ambition is to play with those young and ignorant female students, or to pretend to be a gentleman and swindle people everywhere. How could you possibly understand these things?" Although she had never said it, she had seen all of Schwerin's actions with her own eyes. At this point, Schwerin's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. After venting enough, Qin Wulei gradually calmed down. Her voice was cold as she said, "This time, I'll try to see if I can convince Instructor Lin Feng. If it still doesn't work, then we'll have to carry out Plan B." She turned around and said, "You're on your own." With that, she left the room. Lin Feng, it's Lin Feng again." Schwerin was so angry that he cursed loudly. "What's so good about that Lin Feng that all of you have to beg him?" Like a gambler who had lost a lot, his eyes were filled with deep hatred. He gritted his teeth. "Lin Feng, I want you dead." Chapter 103. Qin Wulei went to Lin Feng College's place, while Schwerin went to the refining room for the students who were going to participate in the Young Masters competition. In the previous Young Masters competition, Qin Feng College had prepared a refining room for the students who were going to participate in the competition. There were all kinds of forging tools in the refining room, and the environment was quiet and elegant. Within a radius of several hundred feet, there was only one refining room, and almost no one came to disturb it. Inside the refining room, the young men were practicing their skills, ignoring each other, which made the atmosphere in the room quite gloomy. Suddenly, the door of the refining room was pushed open, and dazzling light shone in, injecting a sense of liveliness into the cold room. The young men stopped their forging and looked at the door. "Teacher Schwerin." When they saw the person who had arrived, their expressions relaxed, and the slight dissatisfaction that had arisen from being disturbed also dissipated. "That's right, who else could it be but Schwerin?" Schwerin walked over with a smile and said to the three of them, "How's it going? I haven't seen you for a few days. How's your practice going?" The three of them looked at each other and didn't want to admit defeat. They all showed a sense of pride and said, "We've learned something." "That's good." Schwerin looked at the three of them with appreciation. "The more tense the situation is, the more you need to calm down and put all your energy into practice. You three are all geniuses. As long as you don't panic, there will be a place for you in the Young Masters competition." His words were beautiful, but he didn't think so. In terms of talent, he believed that he was much more talented than the three of them. In front of him, how could the three of them dare to call themselves geniuses? The three young men had their own pride. Hearing Schwerin's words, they didn't think it was fake. They all smiled and said, "Thank you for your kind words." Schwerin nodded, and then his tone became gloomy, as if he was mocking himself. "By the way, I'm here today to tell you something. I hope you can prepare in advance." "What is it?" The three of them looked at Schwerin, puzzled. Schwerin smiled bitterly and said, "Recently, a refining instructor came to Qin Feng College. His name is Lin Feng. Have you heard of him?" One of them thought for a while and said, "I heard from a junior student that this Lin Feng is a cripple. It is said that many people in the college are not satisfied with his decision, and they are even dissatisfied with the dean's decision. They are afraid that the dean's decision will destroy the grade 1 student." "Yes, I've heard of it too." The other student nodded. The corners of Schwerin's mouth curled up, but the smile on his face became even more bitter. "That's right. Instructor Lin Feng is indeed a cripple. However, his refining ability is quite extraordinary. Even I can only admit defeat. The nearest youth said disapprovingly, "That Lin Feng is just a cripple. Even if he has some teaching ability, it is limited. How can he be compared to Teacher Shui?" "Teacher Shui, don't belittle yourself." "No, no, no, I'm not belittling myself. It is the truth." Schwerin showed a magnanimous look, and his face was full of admiration. "That Lin Feng does have some ability. Just based on teaching ability, I'm afraid I can't compare to him." The few of them couldn't help but be curious. As a cripple, how could Lin Feng have such outstanding teaching ability? They still had doubts in their hearts. After all, Shui Ren's teaching ability was obvious to all, and the title of Chief Armament Master was not an undeserved reputation. If he didn't have any ability, how would Shui Ren be able to obtain the recognition of these few genius students? It should be known that each and every one of them were proud and arrogant people. Ordinary people simply couldn't enter their eyes. Regarding Shui Ren's words, they only thought that Shui Ren was being modest. They couldn't help but have a better impression of Shui Ren. This teacher was indeed a modest gentleman. "Teacher Shui, why did you mention Lin Feng for no reason?" the other student asked, puzzled. Shui Ren didn't directly answer this student's question. Instead, he sighed and said in disappointment, "Jiang Feng, Guochang, Luo Wenshan, I came here today to see you for the last time. Perhaps after today you and I will never meet again." The few of them were startled. "What happened? Teacher Shui, why did you say that?" Shui Ren clenched his fists, showing an unwilling and angry look. However, he tried his best to restrain his emotions, as if he had been treated unfairly. In the end, a helpless smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Not long ago, the dean summoned us and gathered us in his office. Then, the dean announced a decision. I will be replaced by Teacher Lin Feng as the leading teacher of the students participating in the Young Masters Tournament this year." He looked at the three people in front of him, and said in a low voice, "However, Teacher Lin Feng's teaching ability is indeed not bad. Therefore, it may be better for him to teach you than me." Moreover, the dean stood his ground against the opinions of others. Although many teachers were not satisfied with the dean's decision and strongly opposed it, the dean still insisted on doing it. After weighing the pros and cons for a long time, I finally agreed with the dean's decision and voluntarily gave up this position. How could the dean do this? The three students immediately felt indignant for Shui Ren. At the same time, they hated Lin Feng even more. Not to mention that Lin Feng was just a cripple. It was hard to say if he had any real ability. Even if he did have real ability, how could he compare with Teacher Shui? In their eyes, the dean's decision was ridiculous and stupid. "Teacher Shui, don't worry. We will not stand by and do nothing," one of the students said coldly. The other two nodded and said, "The academy is choosing the leading teachers for the three of us. It should be our consent. If the dean chooses Teacher Shui, of course, we will not object. However, if it is Lin Feng, absolutely not." Shui Ren's eyes flashed with a hint of success. However, on the surface he kept persuading, "Absolutely not. Choosing Lin Feng is the dean's decision after careful consideration. I personally support this decision unconditionally." However, the more he acted this way, the more the students agreed with him. They were even more dissatisfied with Lin Feng and even the dean. The few of them did not speak anymore. However, in their hearts they had secretly made a decision. After Qin Wulei returned to the vice-dean's office, she finally shed her strong pretense. Her face was full of disappointment and helplessness. She sat weakly on the wooden chair, and seemed to have lost her soul. She stared blankly at the porcelain cup on the table, motionless. Obviously, her request was rejected by Lin Feng. However, she did not resent Lin Feng. After all, Lin Feng had no obligation to help her. Moreover, from Lin Feng's standpoint, Xie Qiufeng was his benefactor. Qin Wulei's actions were obviously against Xie Qiufeng. Naturally, Lin Feng would not stand on her side. However, 6 years of hard work, all for naught. Qin Wulei's mouth was full of bitterness. 6 years. Not long after Qin Wulei left, Xie Qiufeng sent someone over to invite Lin Feng to meet him. This matter is full of oddities. Lin Feng's brows furrowed into a knot. His mood became increasingly heavy. If he could, he really wanted to understand everything. This feeling of being kept in the dark did not feel good, especially when there were some unfathomable dangers hidden within. He had a feeling that a storm was coming. Perhaps he really should not have gotten involved in this muddy water. Not long after, Lin Feng arrived at the dean's office. Xie Qiufeng still had that indifferent and profound look on his face. However, his eyes were shining with the light of wisdom. Instructor Lin Feng, Xie Qiufeng said with a serious expression, regarding the matter of the instructor leading the team, I believe you have also realized that there is something unusual about it? Lin Feng nodded slowly. Dean, please tell me the truth. Xie Qiufeng sighed and said, Actually, I planned to tell you later. However, I did not expect that tutor Qin Wulei could not wait to see you. Therefore, I have no choice but to reveal this secret to you. Lin Feng looked at him quietly, waiting for him to continue. Actually, this matter has always been a secret of Qinfeng College. No, it should be said that this matter has always been a secret of the Xie family. Xie Qiufeng said with a heavy tone, in the entire Qinfeng College, except for me, no one knows this secret. In the past, the instructors leading the team did not know this secret either. However, this secret is closely related to the students and instructors participating in the Young Masters tournament. However, I do not know why, but it seems that someone has already known this secret and is secretly hiding in Qinfeng College with evil intentions. If I had not sensed that someone was harboring evil intentions, I would not have explained all this to you in such a hurry. Sensing Lin Feng's confusion, Xie Qiufeng's tone became even heavier. Even his expression became more solemn. He said slowly, Actually, all of this is related to a treasure. A world-shocking treasure. World-shocking treasure? Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He secretly guessed, could it be the mountain soul? In Lin Feng's mind, the only thing that could be called a world-shocking treasure was the mountain soul. Yes, it is a world-shocking treasure. Xie Qiufeng said, This world-shocking treasure was obtained by Xie Qinfeng, the ancestor of the Xie family, whose name shook the world at the cost of his life. It has no effect on ordinary people, low-level warriors, and low-level mages. However, it has an incredible effect on high-level warriors, high-level mages, and blacksmiths. Lin Feng's spirit was lifted. What kind of treasure would require a level 9 expert to pay the price of his life to obtain it? At this critical moment, Xie Qiufeng stopped. He glanced sharply at Lin Feng and said, Before I tell you about this treasure, you have to swear that you will not reveal any information about this treasure to anyone, and you will not use any means to steal it. Even though he knew Lin Feng's character very well, and he trusted Lin Feng very much, he still said such words. It was not hard to imagine how important this world-shocking treasure was. I've set a trap again. This world-shocking treasure is related to many big shot. Please recommend me. Chapter 104. Recommendation votes are getting fewer and fewer. Ranking is getting lower and lower. Urgent. Seeing how serious Xie Qiufeng was, Lin Feng's heart sank. I swear that I won't tell anyone about this item, and I won't use any means to get it, Lin Feng said. If I go back on my word, Xie Qiufeng waved his hand and said, Fine. I'll take your word for it. He apologized. I'm sorry. This is a serious matter, so I have to be careful. Lin Feng nodded to show that he understood. Actually, this treasure was obtained by our Xie clan's ancestor, Xie Qinfeng, in a mysterious place in the demonic beast forest. It was because of it that our ancestor was heavily injured, and not long after, he died in Jianglong County. Xie Qiufeng let out a long sigh. However, our ancestors' last words were that we must use it on the students representing Qingfeng College in the Master Youth Competition until the day it was used up. Instead, he forbade us from using it. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. If it wasn't for this, our Xie family wouldn't have fallen to this state. Even Lin Feng couldn't understand Xie Qingfeng's intention, let alone Xie Qingfeng. It was a really ridiculous decision to forbid his descendants from using such an amazing treasure and instead use it on the students of Qingfeng College. You also think it's unbelievable, right? Xie Qingfeng looked at Lin Feng. However, our Xie family has always followed our ancestors' last words. We have silently protected Qingfeng College and that treasure. No one has ever touched it. Hearing this, Lin Feng was suddenly filled with respect. The sun was setting in the west, and the sky was filled with red clouds. Strings of red clouds were continuous, as if they were on fire, reflecting the earth red. The door and windows of the dean's office were tightly shut. No one could hear the conversation inside. Lin Feng. Xie Qingfeng's expression became even more serious. This is a shocking treasure. It's actually a magical stone. Stone? Lin Feng blinked his eyes, a little surprised. Xie Qingfeng nodded and said, "That's right, it's a stone. It's just that this stone has an incredible power." Although Xie Qingfeng already knew the effects of the stone, he was still amazed. This stone, the great ancestor called it the Saint's Soul. Although I don't know why the great ancestor called it that, we can only use this name and call it the Saint's Soul. Saint's Soul? Stone? Lin Feng could not figure out how these two things were related. The Saint's Soul has an incredible effect. Every high-ranked Earth warrior and high-ranked Earth mage that approaches it will reap great benefit. The more powerful the expert, the more benefits they will reap. On the contrary, the weaker the person, the less benefits they will reap. Warriors or mages below the 6th step will not reap any benefits at all. Xie Qingfeng stroked his white beard, and his cloudy eyes became clear. However, craftsmen are not limited by this. Any craftsman who practice crafting within the range of the Saint's Soul will achieve unexpected results. I don't know about other things, but in terms of skills alone, it can accelerate the process by 10 times. 10 times acceleration! Lin Feng couldn't help but exclaim. Xie Qingfeng nodded heavily. Under the influence of the Saint's Soul, the craftsman's talent seems to have increased by 10 times. Skills that would take 10 days to master can be mastered in 1 day. The higher the talent, the faster the progress. The effect is even more than 10 times. 10 times is just the lowest number. How similar was this effect to the time acceleration in the number 1 space? Every year, students and mentors who participate in the Young Masters Tournament have a chance to use the Saint's Soul to practice their skills for a month. This time was set by the ancestor. He said that this time is the limit of the effect. Once this time is exceeded, the effect will no longer be effective. Xie Qingfeng sighed. You can imagine, if your talent is as monstrous as that of Xiao Ran 2 years ago, I'm afraid you will achieve incredible results in just a month. Mentor Lin Feng suddenly felt like he was hit by a pie that fell from the sky. He forced himself to calm down, but his voice still trembled uncontrollably. Can the teacher in charge also come into contact with the Saint's Soul? Xie Qingfeng looked at Lin Feng deeply, and became more and more sure of his guess. However, he didn't expose him. He asked jokingly, "If there is no mentor who will teach these students?" "Thank you." Lin Feng bowed deeply. "You don't have to thank me. If it weren't for your excellent teaching ability, this opportunity might not have fallen into your hands." Xie Qingfeng smiled and waved his hand. 1 month before the Young Masters Tournament, you will have to wait for another month. He patted Lin Feng's shoulder and said, "Do your best. You have done so much for Qingfeng College, and Qingfeng College will not treat you badly." Walking out of the dean's office, Lin Feng was a little absent-minded. He couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. Originally, 2 months was too short for Lin Feng, and he often worried about it. However, the appearance of the saint's soul immediately solved his urgent problem. As long as he made good use of this 1 month, his progress might be beyond his imagination. Saint's soul? Lin Feng smiled. He didn't know what the saint's soul was, but he knew that he didn't have to worry about the young master's tournament anymore. As long as he was sure of this, it was enough. With a relaxed smile on his face, the heaviness in his heart slowly dissipated. He was finally free from the suffocating pressure. He didn't go back to his dormitory, but went to the workshop reserved for mentors. As usual, Lin Feng taught the students how to refine weapons while practicing his skills in Space No. 1. His days were very fulfilling. Day after day passed quickly, just like the water flowing in the river, the wind passing by his fingertips, and the ashes left behind in the furnace. Finally, one day, under Lin Feng's slightly surprised gaze, Fu Yi bowed and asked, "Mentor, I want to participate in this year's Young Masters tournament. Are you serious?" Lin Feng stared at Fu Yi, but he didn't refuse directly. He pondered and said, "With your current refining ability, it will be very difficult for you to achieve any results. 5 years later, you might be able to compete for the top 10. Given 5 years, he had absolute confidence that he could make Fu Yi a 4-star refiner. However, Fu Yi's gaze didn't change at all. He was still as persistent as before. He said seriously, "I want to give it a try." Lin Feng closed his eyes and thought for a moment. He seemed to understand Fu Yi's purpose. He sighed in his heart and simply agreed to Fu Yi's request. "Since you want to give it a try, go ahead." This child was also a poor person. Fu Yi had mastered the ability to combine 732 skills in the 1000 casting technique. He might be able to achieve some result. "Thank you, mentor." Fu Yi was pleasantly surprised. He didn't expect that Lin Feng would agree to his request. On the other hand, a strange smile appeared on Lin Feng's face. If Fu Yi wanted to participate, then so did he. With both master and disciple participating, this year's Young Masters tournament would become more and more interesting. Jingmen City Province. In the western corner of Jingmen City, there was a small hill with a small lake beside it. However, whether it was the hill or the lake, they were both located in a mansion. The mansion was bustling with people coming and going. There was no lack of people with high status. The mansion was extremely luxurious. In the entire Jingmen City Province, only the Fu Mansion was more magnificent. However, in terms of luxury, the Fu Mansion was still inferior. Outside the mansion, a golden plaque was hung high on the crossbeam of the gate. On the plaque, 3 golden words were engraved, Hanlin Academy. In the Hanlin Academy there were a few houses on the hillside. Inside the house, a handsome young man had just finished his afternoon training. At this moment, a knock came from outside. The young man stood up and opened the door. When he saw who it was, he immediately greeted respectfully, "Senior brother." The senior brother he spoke of was a middle-aged man in his 40s. "Junior brother Qin, your father just sent someone to tell you to go back as soon as possible. It is said that there are a few guests coming from afar and they need you to entertain them." He smiled and said, "Mentor has already agreed. You should go back now." Hearing this, the young man frowned. However, he still maintained a humble attitude towards the middle-aged man in front of him and said in a low voice, "Okay." The middle-aged man nodded with satisfaction. Before he left, he didn't forget to remind him, "Now that the Young Masters tournament is approaching, you'd better focus on refining. If there's anything else, you can deal with it after the tournament." This time, it is said that a grandmaster from the crafting school and his last disciple will be coming. You have to perform well and don't embarrass mentor. This is the first time mentor has paid so much attention to the Young Masters tournament. "Thank you for your reminder, senior brother." The young man respectfully said, "Qin Ku will act appropriately and won't let mentor down." "That's good." The middle-aged man was very satisfied with Qin Ke's attitude. Then I'll go first. You should hurry back and deal with it. After closing the door, Qin Ke had a puzzled look on his face as he quickly walked to the gate of the mansion. Chapter 105. Please recommend. In the Jingmen City province, the Qin family had both power and influence. Although they couldn't compare with the family behind the governor of the Jingmen City province, they weren't comparable to ordinary aristocratic families. Even ordinary five-star craftsmen would have to give them some face. Otherwise, if they were to fall out with them, even the five-star craftsmen wouldn't be able to get away with it. Han Lin was one of the most outstanding five-star craftsmen. Among the several five-star craftsmen in the Jingmen City province, he was ranked second only to Fu Yuanshan. Qin Ke becoming Han Lin's disciple didn't bring disgrace to his status. Even for the Qin family, this was a great blessing. After all, being able to form an alliance with a relatively high-ranking five-star craftsman would also bring a lot of benefits to the Qin family. Qin Mansion. Compared to the Hanlin Academy, the Qin Mansion's area was far smaller. However, this place was heavily guarded and had many experts. The status of an aristocratic family was extremely obvious. After hurriedly entering the Qin Mansion, Qin Ke immediately went to the family's hall to see his father, Qin Qiong. In addition to Qin Qiong, there were two unfamiliar guests in the hall. When they saw Qin Ke, their eyes lit up, and a touch of appreciation flashed in their eyes. "Father!" Qin Ke respectfully greeted. Qin Qiong smiled at the two guests and said, "Brother Han, sister-in-law, this is the son of a dog, Qin Ke." Then, he said to Qin Ke, "Kurer, come here. Father will introduce you." He pulled Qin Ke's hand and said, "This is father's sworn brother, Uncle Han Chao. Next to him is Uncle Han's wife. Quickly greet them." "Uncle, Aunt." Qin Ke turned his head and bowed. Han Chao and his wife quickly returned the greeting. "Prince of Qin, you don't need to be so polite." Hearing this, Qin Qiong pretended to be displeased. "Brother Han, you're calling him Prince of Qin. With our relationship, how can this kid deserve to be called so?" "Haha, it doesn't matter." Han Chao smiled and waved his hand. Qin Qiong helplessly looked at Han Chao and didn't say much on this topic. He asked expectantly, "Brother Han, now that you've met the son of a dog, what do you think? Do you think he's worthy of your daughter?" Han Chao laughed and said, "Brother Qin, you're joking. It should be my daughter who's not worthy of the Prince of Qin." He praised, "Hearing about him is not as good as meeting him in person. Now that I've met him in person, I have to admit that the Prince of Qin is handsome and extraordinary. He's a dragon among men and will have a bright future. On the contrary, my daughter has no virtue and no talent. She only knows how to play with swords and spears all day long. I'm afraid that the Prince of Qin won't like her. It's best that the son of a dog can enter Brother Han's eyes." Qin Qiong smiled and said, "So, this marriage is completely set?" The noblewoman beside Han Chao gently tugged at the corner of his clothes. Her eyes flashed with a touch of worry. However, Han Chao didn't care at all and nodded happily. "Since Brother Qin doesn't mind, this matter is settled." The two looked at each other and then laughed in unison. When Qin Ke heard this, he roughly guessed the whole story. However, he seemed to have some complaints about it. However, in front of Han Chao and his wife, he couldn't refute them. He simply stood quietly and planned to wait for Han Chao and his wife to leave before asking his father to withdraw the order. Han Chao and Qin Qiong chatted for a while. Finally, Qin Qiong said, "Brother Han, you must be tired from the journey. Why don't you go and rest early? Tomorrow we two brothers will drink to our heart's content. We won't rest until we're drunk. What do you think?" "I'm a little tired." "Then I'll thank Brother Qin for your hospitality." Han Chao stood up and cupped his hands. Then, Qin Xiong called for servants to lead Han Chao and his wife to the side courtyard to rest. Father. Qin Ke finally had a chance to speak. Yes? Qin Xiong said. Is there anything else? Qin Ke carefully worded his words. Just now, you and Uncle Han, right? I almost forgot to tell you. Qin Xiong seemed to have just remembered. He smiled and said, Actually, I've arranged a marriage for you a long time ago. The bride is your Uncle Han's daughter. Your Uncle Han came this time for this matter. After a pause, he sat down again and drank a cup of tea before saying, I asked you to come back today just to go through the formalities. After the young master's tournament, you two will be married. But, Father, Qin Ke said in a low voice, I've never met that girl. We know nothing about each other. Isn't it too hasty to marry her? With Qin Xiong's shrewdness, he naturally understood his son's meaning. However, he smiled faintly and said, I've seen that girl not long ago. She is indeed a heroine. In terms of appearance, I'm afraid that there are few girls more outstanding than her in the entire Jingmen city. In terms of talent, although she doesn't have the talent for refining weapons, she is a martial arts genius. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't spend much time on cultivation, she might have surpassed you by the time she reaches your age. He said earnestly, Kur, I have a good eye for people. This girl is indeed rare. If you miss out on her, it will be a pity. I hope so. Qin Ke sighed. Seeing his father's firm attitude, he didn't say anything else. He sighed deeply in his heart. Fine, I'll think about it after the young master's tournament. Now, he really didn't want to be distracted by other things. His goal was to surpass Hanlin's achievement in the young master's tournament. Although it wasn't easy, it wasn't hopeless. Jianglong County, inside the county governor's mansion. A girl supported her delicate chin with her hand and stood in front of the window. She stared blankly at the withered grass and trees outside the window. Her eyes were lifeless, as if she had lost her soul. After an unknown period of time, the girl opened her mouth and sighed. Then, she became calm again. The late autumn wind brought a bit of sadness and coldness, just like her mood at the moment. Lin Yun, where are you? Do you know that I miss you so much? The girl closed her eyes and didn't move for a long time. She murmured in a low voice. In the anticipation of countless young refiners, the young master's tournament was one step closer to the start of the tournament. It was already winter and people wearing cotton-padded jackets and overcoats could be seen everywhere on the street. The only difference was that it was less lively and more desolate. However, the Breeze Academy was still bustling with activity as usual. Just like that, a month passed by quietly. In Lin Feng's dormitory. I'll be away for a month. During this month, you can practice your skills in the refining room. I've already informed the tutor in charge of opening the door. Lin Feng said to Fu Yi and the others. He glanced at Fu Yi and said slowly, Fu Yi, I've already taught you the last dozens of combinations of 1,000 casting techniques. During my absence, you only need to practice according to what I said. Although the effect may be limited, you can't waste this time. Fu Yi, Qiaowen, Jiang He, and Yao Yongkai said respectfully, Yes, teacher. Qiaowen, you're their senior brother. During my absence, you'll be in charge of taking care of and supervising them. Fu Yi, Jiang He, Yao Yongkai, you have to listen to your senior brother's instructions. Don't be stubborn. Lin Feng said, If you encounter anything, don't be impulsive. Everything will wait for my return. Remember this. Qiaowen nodded. I understand. Lin Feng didn't have anything else to say. He waved his hand. All right, you can leave now. Knock, knock, knock. Not long after Fu Yi and the others left, Lin Feng's dormitory door was knocked. Tutor Lin Feng, the dean sent me to invite you over. Thank you. Let's go. Lin Feng straightened his clothes and glanced at Nono, who was dozing off on his shoulder. He closed the door and slowly disappeared into the corridor. After entering the dean's office, Lin Feng saw Xie Qiufeng at a glance. Beside Xie Qiufeng were 3 young men. In terms of age, the 3 young men were about the same as Lin Feng. Even if they were younger, they weren't much younger. "This is Lin Feng, Hayashi-sensei," Xie Qiufeng said to the 3 of them. "Later, I'll send you to a secret place. He'll be responsible for your special training. The time limit is 1 month. During this time, you only need to listen to Tutor Lin Feng's instructions. You don't have to worry about anything else. I'll send someone to deliver food and water to you at fixed times." "He's Lin Feng?" "He's about the same age as me, and he's a cripple." "He's the new tutor that Teacher Shui mentioned? He has the ability to teach us? Is this a joke?" The few students couldn't help but feel dissatisfied. However, in front of Xie Qiufeng, they couldn't express their dissatisfaction. Lin Feng glanced at the 3 academies and didn't show much emotion. Geniuses? Compared to the likes of Fu Yi and Wen Han, these geniuses were really nothing in his eyes. Feeling the slight hostility from the 3 of them, Lin Feng didn't understand why they were hostile towards him. However, he didn't care about them at all. If he couldn't even suppress these 3 guys, then he might as well go home and farm. He couldn't be bothered to embarrass himself outside. Towards Lin Feng, the 3 of them had suppressed their anger. They planned to teach Lin Feng a lesson when they were alone. Not to mention that they wanted to help Shuiren and Teacher Shui vent their anger. Just for themselves, they wouldn't let Lin Feng off. "This guy is about the same age as us. If we let him teach us, doesn't that mean that we're nothing?" To them, who had always been regarded as the most outstanding geniuses in Qinfeng College, this was unacceptable. Chapter 106. Frost covered the ground, the grass and trees withered, the biting cold wind circled the room a few times, and finally poured into the room through the windows and doors, causing the temperature in the room to drop by 3 degrees. Xie Qiufeng stood up, and said to Lin Feng and the 3 students, "It's about time, follow me." Walking out of the director's office, there were 16 warriors and 2 mages standing at the door, quietly waiting for orders. "Let's go." Xie Qiufeng nodded to the group, and then waved to Lin Feng and the other 3. Xie Qiufeng walked in front, Lin Feng followed behind, the 3 students at the back, and the 16 warriors and 2 mages divided into 2 rows on the left and right. The group of people majestically walked towards the library. "That amazing treasure is in the library?" Lin Feng thought to himself. "This place doesn't seem to be very safe, does it?" After entering the library, Xie Qiufeng's steps did not stop, and walked up to the 3rd floor, only stopping when he reached the 3rd floor. The 16 warriors and the 2 mages sensibly dispersed, some of them guarding the entrance to the 3rd floor, and the others blocking the back of Xie Qiufeng's group, to prevent outsiders from entering and causing any accidents. "Great Elder, I'll have to trouble you again." At the corner of the room, an old man with a white beard was sitting cross-legged. Xie Qiufeng walked up and said softly. The old man nodded to Xie Qiufeng and sighed. In the blink of an eye, it's been 5 years. While sighing, the old man took out a key from his chest, and handed it to Xie Qiufeng, saying, "Go quickly and return quickly." After saying these 4 simple words, he closed his eyes again, and did not speak again. "You all stay here and guard," Xie Qiufeng said to the group of warriors and mages. The group of people respectfully nodded, and became more alert, guarding this place even more seriously. After that, Xie Qiufeng took the key and walked towards the smooth wall. He used his hand to make a few strokes, as if he was measuring the length and looking for the position. Finally, after about half an incense's time, he found the tiny hole that was almost undetectable. He inserted the key into the hole and turned it gently. A deep sound of metal rubbing against stone sounded. Hua! Hua! The smooth wall automatically split into 2. It was quite magical. Before this, Lin Feng did not see any cracks, and did not know what material the wall was made of. "Come in." Xie Qiufeng waved to the few people and walked in. Inside the stone door, it was very dry, and the temperature was much higher than outside, but there was not enough light, so it was a little dim, but this was not a big problem. After Xiet Xiufeng lit the oil lamp, the inside was lit up, although it was not as bright as daytime, but they could still see things around. As soon as they steadied themselves, Xiet Xiufeng turned the stone tulle where the oil lamp was placed. Before they could react, the stone door slowly closed. Then, the sealed and empty little stone house slowly descended. However, there was something hanging from the roof of the stone house, or there was something holding it up from below. Therefore, the speed was neither fast nor slow, just within the range that everyone could bear. After descending for about 10 breaths, the stone house stopped descending. Hua! Hua! On the other side of the stone house, 2 stone doors opened automatically. Lin Feng had an indescribable feeling. Isn't this an elevator? Yes, the function of this stone house was almost exactly the same as an elevator, but the power was different, the material was different, and the internal machinery was very different, but in terms of function, this thing was no different from an elevator. Chirp! Chirp! Nono had woken up at some point. It opened its eyes and jumped up and down on Lin Feng's shoulder, its eyes sweeping around in front of it, as if it was very excited. Xiet Xiufeng and the others glanced at it, but did not say anything. It was just a beautiful little bird, it was really not worth their attention. Lin Feng, on the other hand, had a trace of doubt in his heart. Lin Feng, hurry up, there's something good. This was what Nono said to Lin Feng through its psychic power. Its tone was very excited and anxious, and it was urging him with all its might. After spending so much time with Nono, this was the first time that Lin Feng had seen Nono so excited, and for a moment, he could not help but look forward to the so-called Saint's soul even more. The group followed Xiet Xiufeng around and around, passing through more than 10 mechanisms, and spent a quarter of an hour before they finally arrived at their final destination. This was a rather large underground stone cave. The stone cave was extremely spacious, and there were more than 10 casting stations, the materials piled up into mountains, and on one side of the casting station, there was an underground fountain, the spring water constantly spurting out from deeper underground, and then flowed out from the holes on both sides, flowing to an unknown place. This is it. Xiet Xiufeng stopped. He looked at Lin Feng and said, Instructor Lin Feng, in the next month, you will undergo special training here. He said solemnly, I'll leave the 3 of them to you. These words immediately made the 3 students extremely unhappy, but at this moment they suppressed this anger, and responded with silence. I'll do my best. Lin Feng said, I hope I won't let you down. Xiet Xiufeng nodded lightly. With your words, I'm relieved. He had a relaxed smile on his face. Everything here, I'll leave it to you to arrange, I won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye. Goodbye. Lin Feng clasped his hands and said. No one noticed. Nono's small body started to heat up and flickered with a weak gray light. After a moment, Xiet Xiufeng's figure completely disappeared from their sight, and only the light footsteps could be heard, and gradually became smaller. Lin Feng came back to his senses and said to the 3 students, You heard the dean's words just now. So, now, it's our turn to speak. One of the students finally tore off his disguise, and said with a ferocious face, I've wanted to teach you a lesson for a long time. It's too uncomfortable to endure in front of the dean for so long. Another student sneered. Say it, how do you want to die? The last student looked at Lin Feng indifferently. As soon as Xiet Xiufeng left, the 3 people's faces changed. These 3 students were all rank 3 Earth Warriors, and they had enough confidence that no matter who attacked, they could easily teach Lin Feng a lesson. However, the change of the 3 people did not make Lin Feng's expression change. Before this, he had already guessed it. All of this was within his expectations. Since he had already guessed it, and still dared to come, it meant that he was not afraid of the 3 of them. Then where did Lin Feng's confidence come from? Are you sure you want to do this? Lin Feng said with a faint smile. Do you really think that I have no power to fight back and can only be bullied by you? Ha 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 ha. At this time, you still want to scare us. The last student who spoke laughed. You're just a cripple, can you fight back against us? I didn't want to expose myself. Lin Feng originally wanted to say that he didn't want to expose his identity as a mage. The mental strength of a rank 6 Earth mage was enough to instantly cast low-level spells, and it was enough to subdue these 3 people. Even if he couldn't subdue them, he could ensure that he wouldn't be threatened. But before the second half of the sentence came out, he suddenly stopped, and his eyes suddenly swept to the side. Not only Lin Feng, but the eyes of the 3 students also swept to the side together. Nono flew away from Lin Feng's shoulder at some point, floating above the fountain that spurted out from deeper underground. A gray light erupted from its body surface, and faintly, a hot current swept through the stone cave, causing the temperature in the cave to rise a lot. Lin Feng, it's so comfortable, you also come quickly. Nono showed a look of enjoyment, and its small eyes narrowed slightly, making people unable to restrain their laughter. Lin Feng didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and just as he was about to speak, the gray light on Nono's body suddenly intensified, and even directly covered the light of the oil lamps in the stone cave, causing the whole stone cave to sink into an endless gray world. In Lin Feng's line of sight, everything disappeared. The casting tables, the materials, the fountain, and the 3 students beside him all disappeared. Apart from gray, there was nothing else. His face changed. This unknown scene caused a trace of uneasiness to grow in his heart. Chirp, a loud and clear chirp sounded from a certain place in the gray world. The 3 students were already scared to the point that their faces were deathly pale, dripping with cold sweat. They stood in place, not daring to move in the slightest. A terrifying word floated in their minds at the same time: demonic beast. An unknown scene, a loud and clear chirp. Apart from a bird-type demon beast, they really couldn't think of any other possibility. In this gray world, time didn't seem to exist. They didn't know how much time had passed. Maybe it was a moment, or maybe it was 10,000 years. When the gray receded like the tide, the world slowly became clear, and they finally regained consciousness. However, the moment they opened their eyes were wide open, and their mouths were wide open, terrified. Even Lin Feng's face couldn't help but change greatly. Roar! The deafening roar made the whole stone cave tremble, as if the earth was afraid. A student's face was pale, and he desperately murmured, "Demon beast!" Not only a demon beast, but also a peerless demon beast. They saw an incomparably huge demon beast squatting in front of them. This demon beast was so huge that the originally spacious stone cave became incomparably narrow. Even if this demon beast stood up, it would break the ceiling of the cave. The most scalp-numbing thing was that this demon beast's eyes, which were bigger than lanterns, were coldly staring at them, and its eyes were flashing with an oppressive bloodthirsty red light. Under their terrified gazes, the mysterious giant demonic beast slowly opened its mouth. A ray of light flickered in its throat. "It's over." Including Lin Feng, everyone's heart was filled with despair. Chapter 107. If this huge demonic beast wanted to attack them, they would not be able to fight back at all. And at this moment, this demonic beast seemed to have already launched the prelude to its attack. In an instant, a ray of gray light shot out from his mouth. The 3 students were so scared that they cried out loudly. Their hearts were like dead ashes. Other than despair, there was nothing else in their eyes. Thousands of thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind, but in the end, he let out a long sigh. This time, he was afraid that he was going to die for sure. That beam of gray light passed through the 3 students and hit Lin Feng with great precision. Their eyes suddenly shrank, as if they had seen Lin Feng being evaporated by that gray light with a high temperature. Their eyes could not help but show a trace of sympathy. but in the next moment, they were stunned on the spot as they stared blankly at the scene in front of them. A mysterious and profound array diagram floated in front of Lin Feng's chest. That gray light flowed through the various lines of the array diagram and finally gathered at the center of the array diagram. It turned into a gentle and pure energy and fused into Lin Feng's body, slowly transforming the various organs in his body. Lin Feng himself was also stunned by the scene in front of him. My power! Lin Feng felt that his strength was rapidly rising. The speed was so fast that it made him afraid. Not only his strength, even his mental strength had also received a huge increase. His consciousness became clearer and clearer. The places that he had been confused about in the past were all solved. His understanding of various refining techniques had also increased by a level, and he had a deeper understanding of them. He even had an inexplicable feeling that the boundless earth beneath his feet had become more and more intimate. That feeling was as if he had returned to his mother's embrace. It was warm, incomparably intimate, and gentle. Without waiting for Lin Feng to react, that incomparably huge demonic beast's body quickly shrank and flew towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng subconsciously raised his hand, preparing to block, but when he saw this demonic beast, he was stunned. Lin Feng. The demonic beast's body had already shrunk to the size of a palm. It flew to Lin Feng's shoulder and stepped here and there, extremely excited. No. Lin Feng stared at the no in disbelief. That huge demonic beast was a no? The three students also had their mouths agape, their eyes wide open in disbelief. Who would have thought that the demonic beast that scared them so much was actually the little bird on Lin Feng's shoulder? That little guy is a demonic beast? A terrifying giant demonic beast. Suddenly, the eyelids of the three students twitched, and they had the urge to cry. If they were not wrong, this demonic beast should be Lin Feng's contracted demonic beast. And just now, they seemed to be planning to teach Lin Feng a lesson. They looked at Lin Feng in fear. Their hearts were filled with resentment. Why didn't you tell us earlier that you had such a terrifying demonic beast? If we knew that this little guy was so terrifying, how would we have dared to provoke you? Can't you be a little more honest? No, just now that demonic beast was you? Lin Feng still found it hard to believe. No said, yes, that was me. Lin Feng gestured a few times with his hands. Then how did you become so big? That's my innate ability. No seemed to be confused by Lin Feng's fuss. Before I could only shrink, now I can grow bigger. Hee, next time if I don't like the look of someone, I'll grow bigger and scare them. I'm sure they'll piss their pants. Hearing this, Lin Feng's forehead was filled with black lines. Lin Feng, no, boss, I'll call you boss from now on. It's more intimate. No flapped its wings and proudly said, my strength has increased by a lot. In the future, I will be able to protect you. From today onwards, no one will dare to bully you. The expression on its face was exactly the same as a human's. It was extremely vivid and magical. These words once again left Lin Feng speechless. Lin Feng found that Nono's strength had increased, and its intelligence seemed to have increased as well. According to the current situation, Nono's intelligence should be about the same as a teenager's. Boss, I'm talking to you. Why are you in a daze? Nono asked strangely. Lin Feng replied, sorry, I was distracted. Nono laughed and asked for credit. Boss, this time your spiritual power and strength have increased by a lot. Even your innate ability has increased by a lot. Shouldn't you reward me? Mentioning this, Lin Feng just remembered that he seemed to have gained a lot from Nono. First of all, his strength had at least doubled. His spiritual power had also increased significantly. Although he didn't know how much it had increased, it was definitely not a small amount. Finally, his innate ability. Yes, whether it was the warrior's innate ability or the sorcerer's innate ability, both had a huge increase. Compared to the last time, it was not the slightest bit worse. As for his innate ability in refining, although he hadn't tested it yet, he could guess that the increase in his innate ability in refining would not be worse than the increase in other aspects. Lin Feng seemed to have received a comprehensive baptism. Then what do you want as a reward? Lin Feng smiled and asked. Nono rolled its eyes and said expectantly, How about a beautiful female bird as a reward? Lin Feng suddenly choked. Cough, 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 cough. He was choked by Nono's words. After a long time, he looked at Nono in astonishment. You're a male bird? Speaking of which, whether it was Lin Feng, Lin Yun, or his disciples, no one who had seen Nono would think that Nono was a male bird. This fact was too shocking and too funny. Boss, what are you doing? It's been so long, and you still can't tell whether I'm a male or a female. Nono was immediately dissatisfied, and his emotions grew. He took the opportunity to make a request. In order to make up for my hurt heart, you have to find me one, no, at least 3 female birds, and they have to be as beautiful as me. After all, not all female birds are worthy of me, Nono. One was not enough, and he wanted 3? Lin Feng was simply thunderstruck by Nono's shocking words. This proud little pervert. He really didn't know what was in that little head of his. Okay, I'll definitely find one for you in the future. Lin Feng was defeated and hurriedly agreed. Otherwise, who knew what other conditions Nono would make? I still have to take care of some other things, you can rest quietly for a while. He was a little afraid to listen to Nono, otherwise he would be struck to death by lightning sooner or later. Nono was very satisfied with Lin Feng's agreement. He rubbed his little head on Lin Feng's shoulder, making a wrinkle in his clothes, and then lay down comfortably on the wrinkle. He closed his eyes and said, Boss, you take your time, I'll sleep first. After settling Nono's matter, Lin Feng finally let out a sigh of relief. He raised his head and looked at the 3 students. The 3 students were shocked, and hurriedly put on a smile and said, Hayashi-sensei. Just now you guys. Lin Feng looked at the 3 with a half-smile. Cough, cough, cough. We were just joking with Instructor Lin just now, that's all. Yes, with Hayashi-sensei's teaching ability, to be able to learn refining from Hayashi-sensei is our good fortune from our previous lives. If anyone dares to say anything bad about Hayashi-sensei, I promise I'll fight him to the death. The 3 of them scrambled to express their goodwill, to express their admiration for Lin Feng. While talking, they glanced at Nono on Lin Feng's shoulder from the corner of their eyes, and couldn't help but shiver. Who would have thought that this unremarkable little thing on Lin Feng's shoulder was actually an extremely terrifying flying demon beast? Not to mention other things, just by looking at its size, one could imagine how terrifying its strength was. Going against Lin Feng? They didn't want to die because their lives were too long. Since the students already recognized their mistakes and no longer went against him, Lin Feng also didn't want to bicker with them. Alright, you can start practicing now. He didn't care if the 3 students were really convinced or not, as long as they didn't give him any trouble and obediently followed him to learn refining, it was enough. After giving the students some pointers and letting them practice on their own, Lin Feng entered Space 1. He couldn't wait to ask, Number 1, quickly check how much my physical strength and mental strength have improved. His face was both expectant and nervous. Master, please wait a moment. Number 1 replied, and the surrounding space quieted down. A moment later, Number 1 said in a surprised tone, Master, congratulations, your physical strength and mental strength have improved a lot. How much is a lot? This was the main point Lin Feng was concerned about. Your physical strength has increased to 600 P, and your mental strength has increased to 2800 P. In other words, you have just reached the standard of a rank 3 warrior and rank 7 mage in the outside world, not a bit more, not a bit less. Number 1 sighed sincerely. The most important thing is that the time acceleration function of Space 1 can be increased to 280 times. 280 times the time reversal, 279 times more time than others, Lin Feng had no reason not to succeed. Chapter 108. I've just been informed by my boss that this book will be published on March 1st at midnight, which is 2400 hours on Saturday night and 0000 on Sunday. Therefore, I would like to ask for the support of all the refiners here to reserve a guaranteed monthly ticket for next month. The groundwork is almost done. After the book is published, there will be a lot of great reviews. I'm sure that all the refiners here will be very satisfied. Finally, I would like to ask for your recommendation ticket again. The changes in Nono were of great significance to Lin Feng. Whether it was the improvement of his strength or the improvement of his talent in refining weapons, they were all of great help to Lin Feng. The improvement of his talent in refining, in particular, had solved Lin Feng's urgent problem. In the limited 1 month, Lin Feng's achievements would be unimaginable. Number 1. Turn on the teaching mode. When there was no one to disturb him, Lin Feng would focus on practicing his skills in Number 1 space, cherishing every minute and second. Such a life was very similar to when Lin Feng was teaching his disciples in the refining workshop. However, the 3 of them were not his disciples. Naturally, he did not need to teach them in depth. He only needed to tell them what he needed to say, and if he was in a good mood, he would give them some pointers on how to change their movement. That would be enough. Even so, the rate at which these students improved was unimaginably fast. Their talent in refining was not bad in the first place. In the vast Qinfeng College, only a few students could surpass them. Now that they were in the cave of Saint Soul, with Lin Feng's guidance, their progress was naturally terrifying. It was no exaggeration to say that the skills they practiced here for a day were equal to those they practiced for a month. And that was before Lin Feng spent all his time teaching them. Otherwise, their progress would be even more unbelievable. Drip, 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 a trace of water from the underground fountain soaked into the stone wall. The water gathered together and turned into crystal-clear water droplet. They were as clear and bright as crystals and slowly flowed down along the protruding lines on the stone wall. In the end, they dripped back into the water, creating small ripples. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. While the 3 students were resting on the spot, Lin Feng was frowning in Space 1. In this one day, the time it took him to master the combination of skills had indeed decreased. His practice speed had increased, but it was still much slower than he had imagined. After all, his weapon refining talent had improved a lot, and the time he needed to master the skills had decreased. Moreover, the saint's soul in the cave had an even more miraculous effect. Logically speaking, the speed at which he could master the skills should have increased by at least 30 times. What went wrong? Lin Feng fell into deep thought. After thinking for a long time, he suddenly realized a problem. He practiced in space number 1, not in the outside world. As an independent space, space number 1 was unlikely to be affected by the outside world. Thinking about that, Lin Feng's heart couldn't help but sink. His consciousness retreated from space number 1 and sensed the outside world. He was standing on a boundless land. Mysterious yet intimate waves surrounded him all the time. It was an indescribable feeling, but he could feel that vitality was bursting out and affecting him all the time. Once he returned to space number 1, the feeling was gone. It was completely gone. Space number 1 cannot be used in this place. Lin Feng's heart sank to the bottom. In that case, the saint's soul is useless to me. He could choose either the time acceleration function of space number 1 or the temporary enhancement function of the saint's soul. He couldn't have his cake and eat it too. What should he choose? After thinking for a long time, Lin Feng found it hard to make a choice. In the end, he asked number 1 to analyze the problem and ask for number 1's opinion. He told number 1 everything in detail and asked in the end, Number 1, what do you think I should choose? Out of his expectation, Number 1 asked in confusion after hearing everything, Master, have you forgotten the reality simulation function of space Number 1? You mean? Lin Feng's eyes glittered, and he became more and more excited. Space Number 1 can simulate the environment of the cave, including the invisible waves. Number 1 nodded and said, those waves are like the seismic waves of an earthquake or the radiation of the sun. Some of them are visible, and some are invisible. But in the end, they all have an impact on the outside world. This kind of wave can be simulated in space Number 1. Lin Feng was relieved after hearing Number 1's words. He said to Number 1, then, let's simulate the environment of the cave now. Hardly had he finished his sentence when the surroundings of space Number 1 changed. Everything in the cave was restored. The fountain, the walls, the water, the foundry, the materials, everything that existed in the cave was there. Except for the 3 students, it was like another cave, an identical cave. This feeling. Lin Feng nodded excitedly. Yeah, that's the feeling. It's the feeling of returning to his mother's embrace. Yeah, that's the feeling. It's amazing. He looked at Number 1 with admiration. Number 1, you're amazing. Number 1 was indifferent to Lin Feng's praise. He only responded with a faint smile. Number 1, again. Turn on the teaching mode. Lin Feng's intuition told him that this time, the speed at which he grasped the skills would increase by an unimaginable amount. As it turned out, Lin Feng's intuition was right. In the following period, Lin Feng made rapid progress. Compared to before, one was flat ground while the other was in the sky. Even without the time acceleration function of space Number 1, he was not much worse than those geniuses. And with the time acceleration, with the help of the 280 times time reversal, Lin Feng made great progress in a short period of time. At this rate, in 30 days at most, no, 20 days at most, Lin Feng would be able to master the combination of 10,700 skills of myriad casting. The frost melted and condensed, condensed and melted, the sun and the moon alternated, and the stars moved. Unknowingly, it began to snow outside. Another year's winter had covered Jianglong County in silver, which was very charming. There was no concept of time inside the cave. The 3 students and Lin Feng spent their time nervously practicing. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The 3 students had successfully been promoted to Samsung refiners. They only needed to go to the Craftsmen's Guild to take the Samsung Refiners examination and obtain the Samsung Refiners badge. Then, they would be official Samsung Refiners. Although they had not obtained the Samsung Refiners badge, their refining ability had already met the standards of Samsung Refiners. Ding! The giant hammer fell with a crisp sound. The 3 students, as if they had discussed it beforehand, stopped their forging and walked toward Lin Feng together. Hayashi-sensei. The 3 of them looked at each other and said in unison, You! Lin Feng's consciousness retreated from space Number 1. Looking at the 3 in front of him, he asked in confusion, Is there a problem? The 3 of them bowed to Lin Feng together and said respectfully, Hayashi-sensei, thank you. Their gratitude was from the bottom of their hearts. Dazed for a moment, Lin Feng smiled and said, You don't need to thank me. I was just doing my job. Maybe Hayashi-sensei thought it was his job, but for us, it means a lot. The student in the front said respectfully, Qingfeng College has participated in dozens of Master Youth competitions since it was founded. But in every Master Youth competition, most of the seniors of Qingfeng College left in disappointment during the preliminaries. Even if some of them made it to the finals, they were at the bottom of the list. Although we didn't want to admit it before, we couldn't deny the fact that 2-star refiners would only serve as foils for the geniuses in the Master Youth competition. We claimed to be geniuses of the school, but in fact we were just foils for the geniuses. But this time... He raised his head and stared at Lin Feng. He said excitedly, This time, the three of us have all become Samsung refiners. We are no longer the supporting characters." His voice was filled with an indescribable excitement, and his eyes were burning with a strong sense of hope. This was the first time in the history of Qingfeng College that something like this had happened. As students representing Qingfeng College to participate in the Master Youth Competition, they would make history and win the highest honor. As your mentor, I am proud that you can achieve good result. Lin Feng laughed. So, continue to work hard. There is still half a month left. We will try our best to improve. If you can master a few thousand forging techniques in this half a month, then there will be a place for you in the Master Youth Competition. In fact, he was also looking forward to the end of the month. What kind of expression would the people outside have when they found out about the three students' refining ability? 10700 combinations of techniques. It's over. After the last strike, Lin Feng threw the casting hammer away. He was panting heavily and laughing softly. Ho, 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 ho. His laughter gradually became louder and louder. In the end, he laughed like a madman. Ha ha, ha, ha ha, ha ha. In the end, he suddenly roared. His voice was filled with endless relief. Silent tears slid down from the corners of his eyes. The salty tears were slightly bitter, just like his life. Finally, before the Master Youth Competition, he became a 4-star refiner. 4-star refiner Lin Feng. There were 11 days left before the 1-month period. Then, could he make further progress on the basis of being a 4-star refiner? Chapter 109. The tears on his cheeks had dried up, but the sound of running water was still echoing in his ears. Lin Feng rested for a moment, cleared his mind, and devoted himself to the practice again. Although Lin Feng had mastered all the 10,700 techniques of Wanzhou, he had only mastered them. He hadn't mastered them to the extent that they were instinctive. This was far from meeting Lin Feng's requirement. He wanted to practice these techniques to the point of perfection, so that every cell in his body had a deep memory of these techniques. He didn't need to think about it. His body's instinct was enough to perform these techniques. Only when he reached such a height would Lin Feng be satisfied. Then, he spent 3 days consolidating the 10,000 casting technique. Finally, he had completely consolidated the 10,000 casting technique. When he had completely grasped the 100 casting techniques, 1,000 casting techniques, and 10,000 casting techniques, he vaguely felt that there was a mysterious connection between the 3 types of techniques. He knew that as long as he could understand the principles, his refining ability would be further improved. To understand the principles, he had to have a deep understanding and a clear understanding of the 100 casting techniques, 1,000 casting techniques, and 10,000 casting technique. Coincidentally, his foundation was terrifyingly solid. There were too many refiners in the world who were of a higher level than him, but few of them could match him in terms of the foundation of refining. Next, I have to integrate the 100 casting techniques, 1,000 casting techniques, and 10,000 casting technique. Then, I will be able to become a 5-star refiner. Lin Feng was smiling. He had spent a lot of time mastering the 100 casting techniques, 1,000 casting techniques, and 10,000 casting technique. He would rather delay his advancement to become a 4-star refiner just for this moment. The more solid the foundation was, the more advantageous it would be for his future development. 4 other blacksmiths, mastering the 100 casting, 1,000 casting and 10,000 casting techniques, was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Most blacksmiths would stop at this point, unable to progress any further. However, for Lin Feng it was much easier. In fact, the difficulty was much lower than mastering the combination of 10,000 casting technique. The reason was that Lin Feng's mastery of the techniques had reached a terrifying height. The last 10 days, Whether it was Lin Feng or the three students, they all put all their energy into their studies. Inside the cave, the mysterious fluctuations did not stop for even a moment. The four of them were immersed in their studies, unable to extricate themselves. Until one day, Xie Qiufeng once again appeared in the cave. A month has passed. Everyone, how's your harvest? Xie Qiufeng asked with a chuckle. Even though he pretended to be relaxed, there was still a trace of anticipation hidden in the depths of his eyes. It was just that he had been disappointed too many times, so he no longer dared to reveal this trace of anticipation. He was afraid that the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. The three students looked at each other and smiled in unison. They opened their big mouths and said excitedly, "It's all thanks to Instructor Lin Feng. The harvest is beyond our imagination." Xie Qiufeng was surprised and asked, "How many thousand casting techniques have you mastered?" As soon as these words were spoken, the three of them stared at Xie Qiufeng with strange gazes, causing Xie Qiufeng to feel extremely uncomfortable. "What? Did I say something wrong?" Xie Qiufeng asked curiously. "Dean, you should be asking how many 10,000 casting techniques we have mastered, not how many thousand casting techniques we have mastered." Xie Qiufeng's eyes suddenly widened. With his composure, he really shouldn't have lost his composure like this. But please forgive him, this news was too shocking. He was caught off guard and lost his composure. His face was full of disbelief as he asked in a hoarse voice, "You have already become Samsung's refiners? Only by mastering 1,000 casting techniques could one learn 10,000 casting technique. This was an unchanging law since ancient times." Lin Feng smiled and said, "Finally, I didn't disappoint the Dean's trust. The three of them are now Samsung's refiners. Moreover, they have mastered more than 2,000, 10,000 casting technique. They are not rookies among Samsung's refiners." It was true. Xie Qiufeng took a deep breath. The way he looked at Lin Feng changed again and again. He no longer had the slightest doubt about Lin Feng's teaching ability. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have the talent for refining, he would have knelt down and begged Lin Feng to accept him as a disciple. When the group walked out of the library and smelled the fresh air and felt the dazzling sunlight, they were all intoxicated and enjoying it. They had stayed underground for a whole month. However, if they had a choice, they would have preferred to stay underground for a longer time. Reluctantly looking at the library behind them, Lin Feng and the others followed Xie Qiufeng silently. Under the protection of a group of guards, they slowly walked to the dean's office. In the dean's office, Xie Qiufeng carefully explained some things about the Young Masters Tournament. The Young Masters Tournament will begin in 3 days. The preliminary round will be held in Jianglong County, the promotion round will be held in Jingmen City, and the final round will be held in the capital of Zhao Country. As for the final round, Xie Qiufeng looked at them and didn't continue. The final round was exclusive to those monstrous geniuses. He was afraid that he would hurt their confidence if he told them. Go back and have a good rest in these 3 days. Try to be in your best condition in the tournament. In addition, Instructor Lin Feng, please take care of the 3 of them." Lin Feng replied, "No problem." After leaving the dean's office, Lin Feng led the 3 of them to the instructor's refining room. After a month, the disciples were still in good condition. It seemed that they hadn't been idle during this month. Instructor Fu Yi and the others stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Lin Feng waved his hand and introduced, "These are the students representing Qingfeng College in the Young Masters Tournament. They are Jiang Feng, Guochang, Luo Wenshan, and others. You will be together for a long time in the future. Get to know each other first." After a while, Lin Feng said, "Fu Yi, do you know where to register for the Young Masters Tournament?" There were still 3 days left. It was time to register. "I've asked around. The registration area for this year's Young Masters Tournament is set up at the County Governor's Mansion." Fu Yi hesitated for a moment. He knew something about the relationship between Lin Yun and Han Weiwei. Lin Feng was expressionless. There was no change in his emotions. He nodded slightly and asked, "Where is the tournament venue?" It's also at the county governor's mansion." Fu Yi braced himself and said, "The county governor's mansion." Lin Feng chewed on the words with a complicated expression. After a long time, he sighed and said, "Maybe this is God's will." He said to Fu Yi and the others, "Get ready. I'll follow you to the county governor's mansion to register together." They said respectfully, "Yes." Not long after, Lin Feng, Fu Yi and the 3 students walked out of the Qingfeng Academy together and walked towards the county governor's mansion. They were followed by 4 middle-aged men dressed in the uniform of the Academy's guards, and their duty was to ensure their safety. The 4 of them were all at the 4th step of the martial warriors, and under the 5th step, unless they used a sea of people tactic, there was nothing that could do to them. On the bustling street, a group of people walked forward silently. "We're here." The group looked at the plaque hanging in front of them and stopped in their tracks. Other places were very quiet, but this place was very lively. There were people coming in and out from time to time. Some were alone, and some were accompanied by friends and family. "Let's go." Lin Feng took a deep breath and walked in. Coincidentally, when Lin Feng, Fu Yi, and the others stepped in, a large group of people walked towards the door. If Lin Feng was a step slower, he might have been able to see that the leader of the large group of people behind him was the 4-star refiner he had met once before, Hu Fei. The registration area was located in a courtyard. However, this courtyard, which was usually quite elegant and quiet, was currently filled with people. There were many people around, but there weren't many who had actually signed up. Most of them were here to accompany their friends and family. Of course, there was never a lack of people watching the show, and they accounted for a large portion of them. "You guys go and register." Lin Feng waved his hand. "Go and come back quickly." "Yes, teacher, mentor." Fu Yi and the others said respectfully. The people at the side couldn't help but look at Lin Feng in surprise. They didn't expect that Lin Feng's relationship with these people was actually that of a teacher, mentor, and a disciple, student. Lin Feng didn't seem to be much older than those students. Such a young teacher, mentor. In the entire Jianglong County, there seemed to be only one, right? Who? Of course, it was Lin Feng, who had become a cripple. After a short while, Fu Yi and the others came back one after another. They said, "Teacher, we have already registered." "Yes." Lin Feng nodded calmly. Seeing that Lin Feng didn't move and didn't seem to have any intention of leaving, they couldn't help but look at Lin Feng in confusion. They couldn't understand. "We have already registered. Why is teacher, mentor, still waiting here? Does teacher, mentor, have other things to do?" At this moment Lin Feng suddenly said, "You guys wait here for a moment. I will also go and register." As soon as he said this, they were all dumbfounded. They looked at each other and saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. Lin Feng was also going to register for the young master's competition. This news was too exciting. Without paying attention to their reactions, Lin Feng turned around and walked towards the courtyard. "Teacher, he is really going to participate in the young master's competition? It seems so, if we didn't hear it wrong. Isn't he a cripple now? That seems to be the case, if we remember correctly. Then what is he trying to do? That's what I wanted to ask." Just like that, they stared blankly at Lin Feng walking into the courtyard. The astonishment on their faces didn't fade. At this moment, Hu Fei and his disciples, Taku Yong, walked over together. They were neither fast nor slow. Their faces were calm and they seemed to be extremely confident. "I want to register." "Name?" "Lin Feng." The middle-aged man who was in charge of the registration stopped abruptly and looked up in shock. Everyone in the surroundings cast their gazes over in unison. Lin Feng, that cripple, he also came to register? Chapter 110. As soon as Lin Feng announced his name, it caused an uproar. How could there be such a thick-skinned person in this world? My trip here today was not in vain. I have really learned something new. TSK, a cripple also wants to participate in the Young Masters tournament. Does he think that the tournament is a game for children? If he can participate in the Young Masters tournament, then I will have no problem. Yes. Although we don't know much about refining, at least we are not cripples. Soft whispers could be heard all around. If it was a normal day, they would not have any prejudice against Lin Feng. Lin Feng was not related to them at all. At most, they would feel sorry for this former genius. However, now that Lin Feng had come to register for the Young Masters tournament, they could not stand it anymore. You are just a cripple. How can you participate in the Young Masters tournament? Isn't this a waste of everyone's time? A cripple should have the self-awareness of a cripple. The Young Masters tournament was a competition to discover geniuses. As a cripple, you should just watch from the sidelines. Why are you blindly getting involved? Lin Feng turned a deaf ear to the whispers around him. He said, "Can I register now?" The middle-aged man in charge of registration frowned and looked at Lin Feng. He said in a deep voice, "Young man, although I sympathize with your experience, the Young Masters tournament is a formal competition. Not everyone can participate." He stared at Lin Feng. Only 2-star and above blacksmiths are qualified to participate in the Young Masters tournament. And you? He shook his head. You are not even a 1-star blacksmith. How can you participate in the Young Masters tournament? The surrounding people started to talk again. Some of them seemed to be gloating. Lin Feng stood there alone. He did not fit in with the crowd, as if he was an extra person. Master, Fu Yi looked at Lin Feng standing there alone and could not help but worry. The 3 students also looked at Lin Feng with worry. As Lin Feng's students, they would not laugh at Lin Feng like outsiders. However, in their hearts, they were still very confused by Lin Feng's actions, and even strongly disapproved of it. No matter how talented Lin Feng was in the past, it could not change the fact that he was already a cripple. How could a cripple participate in the Youth Masters tournament? Lin Feng's actions seemed like he was asking for trouble. Who says I'm not a refiner? Lin Feng slowly took out the badge from his bosom and opened his palm. The Samsung Refiner badge that was flickering with a faint light was quietly lying on his palm. This is the Samsung Refiner badge. It can prove my identity. This, the middle-aged man didn't know how to refute. The surrounding people were also dumbfounded. They never would have thought that Lin Feng would actually play such a trick. This was purely a change of concept. However, since Lin Feng had the Samsung Refiner badge, the middle-aged man really couldn't stop him from signing up. Do you really have to sign up? The middle-aged man stared at Lin Feng. Lin Feng calmly nodded. Yes. Okay, I'll sign up for you. The middle-aged man simply didn't care anymore. After all, he would not be the one to lose face. With a few strokes of the pen, the middle-aged man wrote down Lin Feng's name and address on a file. Then he pushed the file to the front and handed the pen in his hand to Lin Feng. Sign your name. Lin Feng picked up the pen and hastily signed his name. Thank you. Then he turned around and left without any hesitation. He also didn't care about the unpleasant words around him. As soon as he walked out of the courtyard, he ran into an acquaintance. Mr. Hu. Since they had met, it would be impolite not to greet him. Hu Fei looked at Lin Feng in confusion. The several disciples behind him, as well as the group of followers, were all puzzled. They didn't understand why the young man in front of them suddenly greeted their master. I'm sorry. You are? Hu Fei asked. Hearing this, Lin Feng's face showed a trace of self-mockery. Mr. Hu is indeed a person of great stature who has short memories. Forget it. Since Mr. Hu doesn't remember me, then there's no need to mention me. Goodbye. After finishing his words, Lin Feng hurriedly left. Hu Fei frowned as he looked at Lin Feng's back. Although he didn't remember this person, he vaguely felt that he was somewhat familiar. He should have seen him somewhere before. Master, he is Lin Feng. Taku Yong stepped forward and whispered in Hu Fei's ear. Hu Fei couldn't help but be surprised. Is this little brother just now the Samsung craftsman genius Lin Feng? Hu Fei suddenly realized and praised, as expected of the young genius who taught 16 Samsung craftsmen. Even if he has become a cripple, his bearing is still extraordinary. At this time, a follower behind him reminded him weakly, Master, you met him once at the beginning of the year. Have you forgotten? Hu Fei raised his eyebrows. I really met this person? However, he searched his memory but couldn't find any memory of meeting this Samsung craftsman genius. That person nodded and said with great certainty, Yes, this person came to the mansion and hoped to be apprenticed to Master. Right, I remember that it was Mr. Yang Yi who brought him here. However, after the strength test, Master saw that his strength was too weak and refused to accept him as a disciple. After this follower's reminder, Hu Fei finally remembered. Yes, it's him. Hu Fei's voice was full of emotion. At that time, I didn't expect that he would be able to learn without a teacher and achieve such a brilliant result. In the past, people said that Lin Feng's strength was very weak and that he relied purely on his skills to become a Samsung craftsman. I didn't believe such rumors, but now that I think about it, it's true. This Lin Feng can be considered a very special genius. It's just a pity. For him, Lin Feng was just a passerby in his life. He sighed and then ignored him. He turned to Taku Yong and the others and said, All right, you can go and register. I'll be waiting for you outside. The arrival of Hu Fei and the others made the surrounding lively to another level. Everyone was looking forward to Hu Fei's genius apprentices. They were all saying all kinds of beautiful words, looking forward to their performance in the young master's competition. As for Lin Feng and Lin Feng's apprentices and students, no one cared about them anymore. Even when they mentioned Lin Feng's name, it was just a topic to pass the time after dinner. A cripple and the apprentices of a cripple had long been forgotten in a corner. Craftsmen's Guild. President, I just received news that Lin Feng and Mr. Fu went to the county governor's mansion to register for the young master's competition. When he heard the news, Qi Ming's first thought was that he had heard it wrong. One was a cripple, and the other was a rookie who had no cultivation talent and only learned about crafting for half a year. They were going to participate in the young master's competition? Qi Ming frowned and said in a deep voice, Are you sure this news is true? The Craftsmen's Guild staff nodded with certainty. The news is true. I've already asked someone to verify it. Hearing this, Qi Ming frowned even harder. He paced back and forth in the room. What kind of trick is Lin Feng playing? Qi Ming was somewhat dissatisfied with Lin Feng's actions. He thinks he hasn't embarrassed himself enough. He actually wants to drag junior brother down with him. His heart was heavy. If teacher finds out about this. He wanted to hide this matter, but he knew that this matter could not be hidden. In the end, he could not help but let out a long sigh. Forget it. Since they want to play, let them play. I only hope that they don't play too much. He originally planned to decline his position as a judge and go to Jingmen City. But after this incident, he had to stay and accept his position as a judge. Go and invite Mr. Huan, Qi Ming said. It was better not to hide this matter from Huan. Besides, Lin Feng and Fu Yi were going to participate in the young master's competition, so they wouldn't stay in Qinfeng College. Hua naturally had to go and protect them. Although it had been a long time, no one knew if the group of people who wanted to hurt Lin Feng had stopped. Time passed in a flash, like a white steed flitting by a crack. 3 days later, it was a sunny day. The dazzling sun shrouded the earth and drove away the cold. On this day, the county governor's mansion was packed with people. It was extremely noisy. The county governor's mansion, which was in charge of the preliminary competition, seemed to be lacking in manpower. Even outside the walls of the mansion, there were many people stopping by. On the contrary, the taverns, restaurants, and inns that were usually bustling were deserted. Although the other places were very crowded, the competition venue was empty. There were not many people around. The county governor Han Chao, the president of the Craftsmen's Guild, Qi Ming, the vice president, White Eyebrows, and the dean of Qingfeng College, Xie Qiufeng, were sitting side by side in the second row. There was only one seat in the first row, which was specially prepared for the 5-star refiner from Jingmen City. At this time, a skinny old man was sitting in the first row. He was dressed plainly, like an ordinary old man from next door. However, his eyes were bright and piercing, and occasionally there was a flash of sharpness in them. No one dared to underestimate him. He was the person with the highest authority in the preliminary competition of the Young Masters competition in Jianglong County, the 5-star refiner, iron like a hook. Next, Zhang He. A middle-aged man who was holding a register shouted loudly, "Good Zhang He! Good luck! I heard that Zhang He has been taught by Mr. Miao and is not far away from becoming a Samsung refiner. He will definitely get a good result this time. I don't dare to say anything else, but it won't be a problem for him to pass the preliminary competition." Amidst the cheers and attention, a young man with a smile on his face slowly walked into the competition venue. Next, Li Wenqing. The middle-aged man continued to shout with an expressionless face. "Li Wenqing? I've never heard of him. What about him? I've heard of him once. He seems to be a genius from the Craftsmen's Guild. Among the refiners in the Craftsmen's Guild, he is one of the most outstanding ones." The Craftsmen's Guild. Then we have to pay more attention to them. None of the people from there are simple. In the midst of their discussion, a man in his late 30s walked calmly and quietly into the field. As soon as he walked in, he chose a casting seat and sat down cross-legged, closing his eyes to rest. Next, Chen Dong. Next, Zhao Mingyuan. Next, Dong Jie. Next, the contestants entered the venue one after another. Some of them were famous and attracted applause and cheers. Some of them were unknown and nobody cared about them. However, among them, there were 2 female refiners who were particularly eye-catching. As soon as they appeared, they were welcomed by countless people. The loud cheers almost deafened everyone's ears. Some of them were even whistling. When it was Taku Yong's turn to be announced, the cheers reached a new height. As the most valued disciple of a 4-star refiner, he was naturally the center of attention in the preliminary round of the Young Masters tournament. He is Mr. Hu's direct disciple and Mr. Hu's most valued disciple. It is said that Mr. Hu has high hopes for him and has poured his heart and soul into him. He did not disappoint Mr. Hu. His refining ability is very good, even better than Mr. Hu's years ago. Taku Yong! Taku Yong! Taku Yong! Cheers and shouts lit up the winter, as if the season was no longer as cold as it used to be. Everyone's face was red with excitement. The young ladies were even bolder in expressing their love. "Taku Yong, I want to marry you." Some were bold, and some were even bolder. "Taku Yong, I want to give birth to your children." That was prestige. That was popularity. As the direct disciple of a 4-star blacksmith, Tua Yong was the most highly regarded direct disciple of a 4-star blacksmith. Just this halo alone was more than sufficient to make him one of the main characters of the tournament today. As for his own profound refining ability, it also allowed him to easily stand out from the numerous refiners and receive even more attention. In the cheers and screams of thousands of people, Taku Yong blushed and walked into the venue in embarrassment. Seeing that he was blushing, the crowd burst into laughter. "This guy is blushing. How cute!" The lively atmosphere was maintained for half an hour. Finally, when the middle-aged man continued to read the next name, the audience gradually calmed down. Sporadic applause and cheers could be heard occasionally, but generally speaking, it was relatively quiet. Next, Lu Qinghe. Next, Li Xiangrui. Next, Su Hong. Here, the middle-aged man suddenly paused. He looked at the name list in a daze and hesitated. Then he took a deep breath and read aloud, "Next, Lin Feng. Lin Feng. Lin Feng. Lin Feng. 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 Feng." In an instant, this name seemed to possess some sort of magical power, causing the entire area to fall silent. It fell into a deathly silence, leaving only the voice that constantly reverberated. The next moment, hush, deafening boos came from the mouths of all the spectators at almost the same time. It was like an avalanche, wave after wave of boos, almost causing the middle of the arena to be lifted off the ground. Refining Frenzy will be uploaded to V at 12 o'clock tonight. Dear refiners, I'll be waiting for you in the Young Masters competition. Let's witness the birth of a miracle together. Be there or be square. Don't stand me up. Chapter 111. I used to like a novel very much, but the novel was mysteriously cancelled and the author disappeared. I was so angry. Many years later, I also became an author and was fortunate enough to join the Great Gods group. Coincidentally, I met the author of this novel in the group. Then I scolded him to his face. "You damn eunuch, trash, scum, dog shit, your words are like farts." Who was the one who swore that he would never be an eunuch or trash? Since you can't do it, don't make promises. Since you said it, don't King cancel it. Don't make us look down on you. The author didn't say anything. He opened the author's platform and sent a screenshot to me. After looking at the screenshot, I fell silent. What was that screenshot? It was a screenshot of the author's platform subscription data. Every chapter had 200 to 300 subscriptions, 3 chapters a day, and a few $100s a month. Actually, I really want to continue writing. The author sighed and went offline after saying that. I looked at the screenshot and was speechless. As I looked at the screenshot, I felt ashamed. Back then, I was reading the pirated version. No matter how the author asked people to subscribe, I was indifferent and ignored him. I felt that the subscription had nothing to do with me. I even made up a lot of excuses for myself. For example, I didn't know how to top up, I didn't have online banking, I didn't have money, I couldn't find a place to top up in a closed school, I didn't have time to top up coins, etc. But when I realized and wanted to subscribe, I didn't have the chance anymore. The book was already cancelled. As everyone knows, subscriptions are the lifeblood of a book. Apart from subscriptions, everything else is fake. Some people say that as long as the popularity of the book is high, the website will give the author money. I don't know who said that, but I have never received such money. On Qidian, a book needs to be recommended. Without the recommendation, readers won't even have the chance to discover the book, which is equivalent to having no future. But Qidian has millions of books. Why would the editor recommend a book? The answer is still subscriptions. Only when the number of subscriptions is high will the editor recommend a book. With the recommendation, there will be an endless stream of subscriptions and income. I have to say that I hate pirated authors. This hatred has developed to the point where I can curse their ancestors without caring about my image. These scumbags, under the banner of saving money for everyone, take other people's hard-earned works and start a traffic business. To put it bluntly, this is infringement. I don't know how to make it free? Do I need you to make it free for me? If you have the ability, buy a book for free. Don't steal other people's books. Since it's a free book with more than 300,000 words, why should I need your help? Sometimes, I would encounter free readers who would complain to me about the book and then threaten to abandon it. Facing this kind of free reader, I only had one word left in my heart: hee. As for Chieba, I can't comment on this group of people because some of them paid for a subscription on Chidian and then went to Chieba to join in the fun. They like the atmosphere of Chieba and aren't free readers. There are many people like this, so I can't comment on them. In addition, I'll teach everyone a way to differentiate between authentic and pirated versions. Anything that requires a fee to read is authentic, and anything that is available for free is pirated. Using this method to differentiate between authentic and pirated versions, it's clear at a glance whether it's authentic or pirated. Finally, I want to share my thoughts with everyone. Rather than waiting until you want to subscribe but don't have the chance, the book you want to read is cancelled, and it was your own doing, you might as well act now. Only by reading the original can you feel at ease without any burden in your heart, and you don't have to worry about the author's cancellation. Thank you to my good friend Turtle is not a tortoise for providing material. Finally, I want to thank editor Tianyu. Thank you, editor Lon Linfo. Begging for monthly votes, begging for subscriptions. See you tonight at 12 o'clock. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.